Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, I want you to imagine something. Picture yourself in southern New Mexico, under a vast star-filled sky. The moon hangs like a pearl, casting a silvery glow over a landscape that seems almost alien. Before you, stretching to the horizon, are endless dunes of soft, white sand. They look like a frozen ocean, waves of pure white gypsum crystal cresting under the moonlight. This is White Sands National Park, a place of profound silence and stark beauty. It feels timeless, doesn't it? As if nothing has ever disturbed this place. But that's where you'd be wrong. Because beneath this silent desert of white, hidden for millennia, lies an ancient secret. A story not written in books or carved in stone, but pressed into the very ground beneath our feet. We're talking about footprints. Thousands upon thousands of them, perfectly preserved. But these aren't just any footprints. They are the ghostly echoes of people who walked this land thousands of years before anyone thought was possible. For decades, the story of how humans first came to the Americas was pretty set. The theory went that about 13,000 years ago, as the last great ice age was ending, massive ice sheets that covered Canada began to melt. This opened up a corridor, a pathway, allowing people from Siberia to cross over the Bering Land Bridge and migrate south, populating the continents. These people, known as the Clovis culture, were thought to be the first Americans. Their distinctive stone spear points were found all over North America, and they were considered the pioneering ancestors of all indigenous peoples in the Americas. It was a neat, tidy story that fit the evidence we had at the time. But science is never about tidy stories. It's about questioning, digging deeper, and following the evidence wherever it leads. And for years, whispers of older sites, pre-Clovis sites, have haunted the edges of American archaeology. Finds in places like Monte Verde in Chile or the Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania suggested people were here much earlier. But these were often controversial and hotly debated. The evidence was just never strong enough to completely overturn the Clovis first model. That is, until now. The footprints at White Sands aren't just a whisper. They're a shout from the past. They'd provide undeniable, datable proof that rewrites the first chapter of America's human story. So how do we find them? Well, the story of their discovery is almost as incredible as the footprints themselves. It begins with David Bustos, the park's resource program manager. For years, he had been noticing what he called ghost tracks, footprints that would appear on the ground only when the moisture conditions were just right and then vanish again as the ground dried. In 2009, he stumbled upon a particularly clear set. He knew he was looking at something special. This wasn't just an animal track, it looked distinctly human. This discovery kicked off a massive multi-year research project, bringing in experts from the U.S. Geological Survey, Bournemouth University, and the National Park Service. What they found was staggering. The footprints were located on the edge of what was once a massive ancient lake, Lake Otero. During the Ice Age, this area wasn't a desert. It was a vibrant, wet landscape teeming with life. And walking along the muddy shores of this lake were humans. Men, women, and most remarkably children. The sheer number of children's prints tells a story of a community, of families living and playing here. It wasn't just a hunting party passing through, it was a home. The researchers found tracks of one individual, likely a woman, walking for almost a mile with a toddler balanced on her hip. You can see how her prints deepen on one side from the weight, and how the toddler, as tiny footprints occasionally appear alongside hers when she set the child down for a moment. It's an incredibly human, relatable scene, frozen in time. But here's the multi-million-dollar question. How old are they? To figure this out, scientists used a brilliant method. The human footprints were found in sedimentary layers, like pages in a book. And trapped in the layers, both above and below the footprints, were ancient seeds from a type of aquatic ditch grass. These seeds could be radiocarbon dated. The results were mind-blowing. The dates came back showing the footprints were between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. Let that sink in. That's 10,000 years before the Clovis people. 10,000 years older than we thought possible. This is a game changer. Why? Because 23,000 years ago, during a period called the last glacial maximum, the massive ice sheets were at their peak. They would have formed an impenetrable wall of ice stretching across the entire continent, from the Pacific to the Atlantic. The ice-free corridor that the Clovis people supposedly used wouldn't open for another 10,000 years. So if people were already in New Mexico 23,000 years ago, they couldn't have come through that corridor. They must have arrived much, much earlier, and by a different route. The most likely alternative route is the coastal migration theory, often called the Kelp Highway. This idea suggests that early peoples, with sophisticated knowledge of marine life, traveled down the Pacific coast in boats, hopping from island to island and living off the rich coastal resources. For a long time, this was just a theory because rising sea levels after the Ice Age would have drowned most of the evidence. But the white sands footprints provide the first truly solid anchor point in time for this theory. It proves people were south of the ice sheets during the height of the Ice Age, meaning they must have gotten there before the ice closed the door. And what was their world like? The footprints don't just tell us about the people. They tell us about the world they lived in. Alongside the human tracks are the prints of the incredible megafauna of the Pleistocene. We're talking about giant ground sloths, some as big as a car, that would rear up on their hind legs to strip leaves from trees. There are tracks of Columbian mammoths, dire wolves, and ancient camels. The human footprints are sometimes found inside the massive prints of these giants, suggesting they were walking the same paths at the same time. Some tracks even show what looks like a hunt-in-progress humans, stalking a giant sloth. You can see the sloth tracks veering and slipping as if trying to evade its pursuers. It's a snapshot of a life-and-death struggle from over 20,000 years ago. This discovery is fundamentally changing our understanding of our own history. It pushes back the timeline of human presence in the Americas by a staggering margin and opens up a whole new world of questions. Who were these people? Where did they come from? What happened to them? Are they the direct ancestors of modern Native Americans, or were they a separate, earlier population that eventually died out? These ancient footprints in the white sand are not an end to the story, but a profound new beginning. They remind us that history is not always set in stone. Sometimes it's written in the sand, waiting for the right moment to reveal its secrets. It is a humbling reminder that there is still so much we don't know about our own past, and the ground beneath our feet holds stories we are only just beginning to learn how to read. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. It's discoveries like this that make you look at the world a little differently, isn't it? If you found this as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more deep dives into the mysteries of our past. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think this discovery means for human history? Until next time, stay curious. Have you ever taken a walk after a rainstorm and noticed the world looks different, fresh, and new? The air is clean, the colors are vibrant, and sometimes secrets hidden just beneath the surface reveal themselves. For one scientist walking across the vast rolling dunes of White Sands National Park in New Mexico, such a walk would lead to a discovery that would send shockwaves through our understanding of ancient history. It all started with a simple observation. After a recent rain, as the sun began to bake the damp sand, a scientist from the U.S. Geological Survey was traversing the landscape. Their eyes, trained to spot geological anomalies, caught something unusual. Faint impressions, almost ghost-like, were appearing on the ground. They weren't the familiar tracks of a coyote or a desert fox. They weren't the random winding patterns left by water erosion or the wind. They looked human. They looked like footprints. Now, finding footprints in the sand isn't typically earth-shattering news. But these were different. They appeared in a place and in a geological layer that seemed far too old. Intrigued, the scientists called in their team. What was initially a routine geological survey was about to pivot into a full-blown archaeological investigation. The team began to meticulously document and examine these ephemeral prints, completely unaware that they were standing on the precipice of rewriting the very first chapter of human history in North America. The initial discovery was just the tip of the iceberg. As the team from the U.S. Geological Survey, alongside experts from Cornell University and the National Park Service, began their work, the scale of what they had found started to become clear. They weren't just looking at a few isolated footprints. They were uncovering a vast network of tracks, crisscrossing the ancient lakebed that once filled this basin. Imagine this scene, a sprawling, muddy shoreline teeming with life, and across it, the footprints of our distant ancestors. To understand the significance, we need to picture what this area was like during the last ice age. Today, White Sands is a stunning desert of pure white gypsum sand. But between 23,000 and 21,000 years ago, it was a completely different world. A massive body of water, known to geologists as Lake Otero, dominated the landscape. The climate was cooler and wetter. Lush grasslands and woodlands surrounded the lake, supporting a menagerie of incredible creatures: giant ground sloths, formidable mammoths, ancient camels, and fearsome dire wolves. It was into this world that humans first walked, leaving their mark on the soft mud of the lake's shore. The challenge for the scientists was proving the age of these footprints. Dating something as transient as a footprint is incredibly difficult, but here, they had a stroke of luck. The footprints were preserved in distinct layers of sediment. And crucially, embedded within these layers, both above and below the tracks, were ancient seeds from an aquatic plant called spiral ditchgrass. These tiny preserved seeds were the key. Using radiocarbon dating, a reliable method for determining the age of organic material, the team could precisely date the layers in which the footprints were found. When the results came back, they were staggering. The seeds, and therefore the footprints, dated to between 23,000 and 21,000 years ago. Let that sink in. For decades, the prevailing theory, known as the Clovis first model, held that humans first arrived in the Americas around 13,000 years ago, crossing a land bridge from Siberia. These footprints weren't just a little older. They were a full 10,000 years older. This discovery didn't just challenge the established timeline. It completely shattered it. It meant that humans were living in North America, deep in the interior of the continent, during the height of the last ice age, the last glacial maximum. This was a time when massive ice sheets covered much of North America, making travel incredibly difficult. The existence of people in New Mexico at this time raises so many new questions. How did they get there? Did they travel down the coast before the ice sheets merged? Or did they brave the harsh, icy interior? The White Sands footprints prove that humans were here, thriving in a world we are only just beginning to understand. This wasn't just a lucky find. It was a paradigm shift, forcing us to rethink everything we thought we knew about the peopling of the Americas. The footprints at White Sands don't just tell us asterisk when asterisk people were here. They tell us asterisk what they were doing asterisk. They paint a vivid, intimate portrait of daily life. The tracks reveal a bustling community. We see the footprints of adults, adolescents, and most touchingly, young children. One of the most common trackways is that of a woman, possibly a mother, walking for over a mile with a toddler's prints appearing beside hers, and occasionally disappearing, suggesting she carried the child for part of the journey. You can almost feel the weight of the child, the weariness and determination in her steps. This wasn't a random stroll. Analysis of the tracks shows purpose. They are mostly straight, indicating people were moving from one point to another with intention. What were they doing? Perhaps foraging for food along the lakeshore, hunting, or simply moving between settlements. The presence of so many children's footprints suggests this wasn't just a hunting party of men. It was a living, breathing community. Families were here. Life was happening. These prints transform abstract archaeological data into deeply human stories. And it wasn't just human stories being told in the mud. Intermingled with the human footprints are the tracks of the incredible megafauna that shared their world. Scientists have identified the massive kidney-shaped prints of giant ground sloths and the unmistakable circular tracks of mammoths. In some places, the human tracks are found inside the mammoth tracks, suggesting people were following in the footsteps of these colossal beasts, perhaps stalking them for a hunt. One dramatic set of tracks shows a sloth rearing up on its hind legs as human hunters approached, a moment of prehistoric tension frozen in time. These interactions provide a direct window into the dynamic and dangerous ecosystem of Ice Age America. These early people were not living in an empty wilderness. They were part of a complex food web, both hunting and being hunted. They were navigating a landscape filled with animals that would seem like monsters to us today. The footprints are a testament to their skill, courage, and deep understanding of the world around them. They show us that from the very beginning, humans were shaping their environment and interacting with the giants that roamed the land. The discovery at White Sands has been met with both excitement and skepticism, as all groundbreaking finds are. The Clovis first theory was the bedrock of American archaeology for over half a century, and shifting such a long-held belief takes time and overwhelming evidence. Some critics initially questioned the radiocarbon dating of the spiral ditchgrass seeds, suggesting that the seeds might be older than the sediment they were found in due to something called the reservoir effect, where aquatic plants can absorb ancient carbon from the water. However, the research team was incredibly thorough. They anticipated these criticisms and conducted further studies to validate their findings. They dated terrestrial pollen from the same layers, which confirmed the ancient dates. They also used a different dating technique called optically stimulated luminescence on the sand grains themselves, which also supported the 23,000-year-old timeline. More recently, new evidence from other sites across North and South America has emerged, also pointing to a human presence long before Clovis. The tide of evidence is turning, and the white sand's footprints are leading the charge. What this discovery truly represents is the dynamic nature of science. It shows us that history is not a static book but a living document that is constantly being revised and updated with new evidence. These faint impressions in the sand have opened a new chapter, pushing the timeline of human presence in the Americas back by 10 millennia. They force us to ask new questions and imagine a deeper, more complex story of the first Americans. Who were these people? What language did they speak? What were their beliefs? The footprints may not answer these questions directly, but they prove that these questions are worth asking. They give a voice to a people who have been silent for 23,000 years. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey back in time. Discoveries like this remind us that there are still so many secrets buried right beneath our feet, waiting to be found. What do you think this discovery means for our understanding of human history? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about the mysteries of our ancient past, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more content just like this. We'll see you in the next one. Have you ever walked on a sandy beach and watched your footprints disappear behind you, washed away by the next wave? It's a fleeting moment, a temporary mark on the world. Now, imagine if those footprints didn't disappear. Imagine if they lasted not for seconds, but for thousands and thousands of years. This isn't a fantasy. It's the incredible reality of the White Sands National Park in New Mexico. What we're about to explore is a story frozen in time, a collection of ancient footprints that are rewriting the history of humanity in the Americas. These aren't just random marks in the ground. They are a ghost-like narrative, telling tales of families, of hunts, and of survival from a time so distant it challenges everything we thought we knew. So, how is this even possible? How can something as fragile as a footprint survive for millennia? The process is nothing short of a geological miracle. For a footprint to fossilize, the conditions have to be absolutely perfect. Think of it like a recipe with very precise ingredients and timing. First, you need the right surface. Not too hard, not too soft. The ancient shores of Lake Otero, which once filled the Tularosa Basin where White Sands now lies, provided the perfect muddy canvas. The sediment had to have the right amount of moisture to hold the shape of the foot. Then, immediately after the print is made, it needs to be gently filled in. Maybe by fine wind-blown silt or a light dusting of sand. This filling protects the delicate impression from being eroded by wind or washed away by rain. Over time, more and more layers of sediment build up on top, burying the footprint deeper and deeper. The pressure from these layers, combined with the right mineral content in the groundwater, slowly hardens the sediment, turning the impression into a solid rock record. It's a process called lithification. Finally, you need the right conditions for preservation over thousands of years. The White Sands area is incredibly dry, and the shifting gypsum dunes acted like a protective blanket, sealing these ancient layers away from the elements. It's this unique combination of a receptive lakebed, rapid but gentle burial, and long-term protection that allowed these ephemeral moments to become permanent fixtures in the geological record. What the dunes buried, they also preserved, waiting for the right moment to reveal their secrets to us. And reveal them they did. The discovery of these tracks is a story in itself. For years, park rangers and visitors would occasionally spot what they called ghost tracks. These faint impressions would appear after a rainstorm when the ground was wet, only to vanish again as the sun dried the surface. They were a local curiosity, a fleeting glimpse into the past. But it wasn't until researchers began to systematically investigate these ghostly apparitions that the true scale and significance of what lay hidden beneath the sand became clear. Using ground-penetrating radar, scientists were able to peer beneath the surface without disturbing the delicate landscape. What they found was staggering. Not just a few isolated tracks, but a vast network of them, crisscrossing the ancient lakebed. It was a snapshot of a bustling, living landscape. These weren't just random wanderings. They were pathways of purpose. The radar revealed long, straight tracks showing people moving with intention from one place to another. Dating these tracks was the next crucial step, and the results were explosive. Nestled within the same sediment layers as the footprints were ancient seeds from a type of spiral ditch grass. By using radiocarbon dating on these seeds, scientists were able to determine their age. The results came back showing the footprints were between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. Let that number sink in. 23,000 years. For decades, the prevailing theory, known as the Clovis first model, held that the first humans arrived in the Americas around 13,000 years ago after the massive ice sheets covering North America began to retreat. These footprints at White Sands are a full 10,000 years older than that. This discovery doesn't just push the timeline back. It completely shatters it. It means that people were living in North America during the last glacial maximum, the peak of the ice. Age of time when much of the continent was thought to be an uninhabitable wasteland of ice. This raises so many new questions. Who were these people? How did they get here? And how did they survive in such a harsh, frozen world? The tracks themselves offer some tantalizing clues. By analyzing the size and shape of the prints, researchers can tell a remarkable amount about the individuals who made them. They've identified tracks belonging to adults, adolescents, and, most poignantly, young children. One of the most touching discoveries is a set of tracks that seems to show a parent, likely a mother, carrying a toddler. The main tracks are larger, but every so often, a tiny set of toddler-sized footprints appears alongside them for a few steps before disappearing again. You can almost picture the scene. A parent walking along, carrying a tired child who occasionally asks to be put down to splash in the mud, only to be picked up again moments later. It's an incredibly human moment, a connection across 23,000 years that reminds us these weren't just ancient peoples. They were families, just like ours. The tracks don't just tell us about the people. They paint a vivid picture of the world they inhabited. Intermingled with the human footprints are the tracks of the Ice Age megafauna they lived alongside. The giant circular prints of Columbian mammoths. The cloven hoof marks of ancient camels and the paw prints of dire wolves. Most thrilling of all are the tracks of giant ground sloths. These were enormous creatures, some standing over 10 feet tall. And incredibly, the tracks show humans interacting with these beasts. In several places, human footprints are found inside the larger sloth tracks, indicating that people were deliberately stalking these giant animals. You can see the human tracks approaching the sloth turning suddenly as if startled, and the human tracks backing away. It's a prehistoric hunt, a dance of predator and prey played out in the mud. This wasn't just survival. It was a display of incredible bravery and skill. Imagine facing down an animal the size of a small car with nothing but a sharpened spear. These tracks provide a unique window into the social lives of these early Americans. The high proportion of tracks belonging to teenagers and children suggests that daily life wasn't just about grim survival. It implies a community where young people were actively involved, perhaps foraging, playing, or learning skills from their elders along the muddy shores of the lake. It paints a picture of a vibrant, multi-generational society thriving in a challenging environment. The White Sands discovery forces us to rethink the entire story of human migration to the Americas. If people were here 23,000 years ago, they couldn't have come through the ice-free corridor between the glaciers because it wasn't open yet. This lends huge support to the coastal migration theory, the idea that the first peoples traveled down the Pacific coast, perhaps in small boats, hopping from one pocket of ice-free land to the next. The journey of these ancient people was one of unimaginable courage and resilience. They were true pioneers, stepping into a completely unknown world filled with strange animals and immense challenges. The footprints they left behind at White Sands are not just a scientific discovery. They are a monument to the human spirit. They are the oldest, most intimate record we have of our ancestors on this continent, a direct physical link to the very first American story. As the sun sets over the brilliant white dunes today, it's humbling to think about the ancient life that once teemed on this very spot. The laughter of children, the purposeful strides of hunters, the heavy tread of mammoths, all silent now. But their stories are written in the earth, waiting for us to learn how to read them. These tracks remind us that history is not just found in books, but is buried right under our feet. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of our ancient past. Let me know in the comments what you think. How does this discovery change your view of history? See you next time. Ever stood in a desert and tried to imagine it as a vast, shimmering lake? It sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, but right here, where the endless white dunes of White Sands National Park now roll, there was once a massive body of water. Welcome to the story of Lake Otero, the lake that vanished. Let's rewind the clock. Way back during the last ice age, this landscape was completely different. We're talking thousands of years ago, a time when colossal glaciers covered much of North America. Down here in the Tularosa Basin, the climate was cooler and wetter. Instead of a sea of sand, a huge, shallow lake stretched for miles, covering about 1,600 square miles. This was Lake Otero. It wasn't a deep, blue ocean-like lake, but more of a sprawling, life-giving oasis. Fed by mountain streams carrying dissolved gypsum from the surrounding San Andres and Sacramento Mountains, its waters were rich in minerals. This created a lush, marshy environment, a haven for an incredible array of life. Picture this: giant ground sloths, some as tall as a giraffe, lumbering along the shore. Herds of Colombian mammoths, with their enormous curved tusks, wading into the shallows to cool off and drink. Saber-toothed cats, stealthy and powerful, stalking their prey through the reeds. American lions, camels, and dire wolves, this was their world. Lake Otero was the heart of a vibrant ecosystem, a prehistoric watering hole teeming with megafauna that we can only dream of seeing today. And it wasn't just the animals. The fertile shores of the lake were also home to the earliest people to set foot in this region. These ancient humans lived alongside these magnificent beasts, hunting, gathering, and leaving their own marks on the land. So what happened? Where did all this water and life go? The answer lies in the shifting climate. As the Ice Age drew to a close around 12,000 years ago, the planet began to warm up. The massive glaciers to the north started to melt and retreat. Here in the southwest, this meant less rainfall and higher temperatures. The streams that once fed Lake Otero began to trickle and then dry up. With less water flowing in and more evaporating under the increasingly hot sun, the lake began to shrink. Year by year, century by century, the shoreline receded. The once vast oasis slowly transformed into a series of smaller, isolated ponds and eventually into a massive, barren mudflat. This is where the story gets really interesting. As the water disappeared, it left behind something incredibly precious: the lakebed itself. This mudflat, known as a playa, was rich in gypsum that had settled out of the water over millennia. But more than that, it held the secrets of the past. Think about walking on wet sand at the beach. You leave footprints, right? Now imagine that on a colossal scale. Every creature that walked across the muddy shores of the receding Lake Otero left behind delicate imprints. These weren't just random tracks. They were snapshots of life: a mother sloth with a baby on her back, a human hunter stalking a mammoth, a group of children splashing and playing in the mud. For thousands of years, these stories were preserved, baked into the drying earth. As the playa dried completely, the wind began its work. The prevailing southwesterly winds started to pick up the tiny, lightweight gypsum crystals from the exposed lakebed. Gypsum is soft and water-soluble, unlike most sand which is made of quartz. This is key to why the white sands are so unique. The wind carried these fine particles and began to pile them up, creating small mounds or dunes. Over thousands of years, this process continued relentlessly. The wind sculpted and shifted the gypsum, and the dunes grew, marching slowly but surely across the basin. The vast, empty playa was buried, and in its place rose the spectacular, ever-changing sea of white sand we see today. The memory of Lake Otero was buried beneath it. For a long time, the full story of Lake Otero was hidden. We knew about the gypsum source, but the details of the life that once thrived here were elusive. Then something amazing happened. Through a combination of erosion and modern technology, scientists began to uncover the ghost tracks. These are the fossilized footprints left behind on the ancient lakebed. Sometimes after a rain, the top layer of sand becomes damp and translucent, revealing the darker, compacted footprints underneath for a brief period before they disappear again. Using ground-penetrating radar, paleontologists and archaeologists have been able to map these trackways without even digging. They've revealed incredible scenes: a person carrying a child for over a mile, groups of teenagers interacting, and tense standoffs between humans and giant sloths. These footprints are a direct link to the past, a tangible connection to the people and animals who called the shores of Lake Otero home. They tell us that humans were here much earlier than previously thought, coexisting with a world of giants. Each trackway is a story, a moment frozen in time. It shows us that this seemingly empty desert was once a stage for epic dramas of survival, family, and daily life. The dunes are not just a geological wonder. They are a monument, a tombstone for a lost world. They are the beautiful, brilliant white ghost of the lake that vanished. So the next time you see pictures of the white sands, or if you're lucky enough to walk on them yourself, take a moment. Feel the cool, soft gypsum beneath your feet and remember what lies just a few inches below. You're walking on top of a lost lake, a prehistoric wonderland, and the echoes of footsteps left by giants and ancient families. The story of Lake Otero is a powerful reminder that landscapes are not static. They are constantly changing, and even in the most seemingly desolate places, there are incredible stories of life, change, and resilience waiting to be discovered. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the wonders of our world. Let me know in the comments what other natural mysteries you'd like to explore. Until next time, stay curious. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're stepping back in time, 21,000 years to be exact, to a world that was both familiar and fantastically different. Imagine a landscape not just shaped by wind and water, but by the thundering steps of giants. This is the story told by Chapter 5 of an incredible discovery, Footprints of Giants and Ghosts. When scientists began excavating this remarkable site, they expected to find traces of early humans, and they did. But what they unearthed alongside these human footprints was a breathtaking menagerie from the Ice Age. The soft, once muddy ground had perfectly preserved the tracks of creatures straight out of a prehistoric epic. We're talking about mammoths, those colossal, shaggy titans with curving tusks that could touch the sky. Their massive, round prints paint a picture of immense power and presence. But the mammoths weren't alone. Prowling through this ancient world were dire wolves, larger and more robust than any wolf we know today. Their paw prints, deeper and wider than a modern gray wolf's, speak of a formidable predator, a true hunter of the Pleistocene. Imagine the tension in the air as a pack of these powerful animals moved across the plains, their tracks intertwining with those of their prey. Each print is a silent testament to their existence, a ghostly echo of their howls carried on an ancient wind. And then there were the giant ground sloths. These weren't the slow tree-dwelling creatures we see in modern rainforests. Picture an animal the size of an elephant, weighing several tons, with massive claws not for climbing but for digging and defense. Their footprints are enormous, almost alien in shape, revealing a slow but unstoppable force of nature lumbering across the land. These were the true giants, herbivores of immense scale, and their presence would have dominated the landscape. Finding their tracks alongside human ones is like finding a page from a lost mythology, a story we thought was pure fantasy, now proven to be fact. The site is a frozen tableau, a snapshot of a single moment in deep time. Each set of tracks tells its own story. The mammoth prints show us where these herds roamed, perhaps on their way to a watering hole. The dire wolf tracks reveal the paths of the hunters, constantly searching for their next meal. And the giant ground sloth impressions give us a sense of the sheer scale and diversity of life that our ancestors shared this planet with. It's one thing to see their skeletons in a museum, but it's another thing entirely to see the mark they left on the earth, a mark that has survived for over 20 millennia. It's a direct connection to these magnificent, vanished creatures. But the most mind-blowing discovery wasn't just the presence of these different tracks, it was how they were arranged. In several incredible instances, the delicate footprints of humans were found directly inside the massive prints of a mammoth or a giant ground sloth. Let that sink in for a moment. A person, 21,000 years ago, deliberately stepped into the track left by a giant. Why? This is where the real storytelling begins. This is where we move from archaeology to a vivid human drama. Was this a hunter silently stalking his colossal prey? Imagine the courage it would take. A small human, armed with nothing more than a sharpened stone or a wooden spear, trekking a multi-ton mammoth. Stepping into its footprint might have been a way to move more quietly, masking their own sound and scent. It's a strategy born of incredible skill and an intimate understanding of the animal's behavior. Each overlapping print becomes a clue in a 21,000-year-old detective story. A tale of life and death stakes, of providing for a family, of a David versus Goliath struggle, written in mud. Or perhaps the story is different. Could it be a child playing a game? We often find children's footprints at these sites. Imagine a young person, filled with curiosity and awe, following in the footsteps of a giant that had just passed by. A moment of wonder, of connection, of a young mind trying to comprehend the sheer size of the creature that shared their world. This simple act of stepping into a track could be a sign not of a hunt but of coexistence of a daily life where these incredible beasts were just a part of the scenery as common as deer or birds are to us today. The footprints don't just tell us that humans and megafauna lived together. They show us how they might have interacted, day by day. And what about the dire wolves? Human footprints are found near theirs as well. Was this a competition? Were humans and wolves hunting the same prey, cautiously circling each other, rivals on the same landscape? Or was it a matter of avoidance? Seeing the tracks of a dire wolf pack might have been a clear signal to our ancestors. Danger. Go another way. These tracks map out a complex dance of survival, a constant negotiation between different species, all trying to make their way in a harsh and unforgiving world. The site is more than just a collection of fossils. It's a narrative. It has a story written by the feet of those who came before us and the magnificent creatures they lived alongside. These ghosts and giants weren't just background characters in the human story, they were central to it. They shaped human evolution, influenced our cultures, and populated our earliest myths and legends. The mammoths, the dire wolves, the giant sloths, they were the forces of nature that our ancestors had to understand, respect, and overcome. Looking at these overlapping prints, we get the clearest picture yet of this shared world. It's a reminder that for the vast majority of our history, humans were not the undisputed masters of the planet. We were just one part of a complex, vibrant, and often dangerous ecosystem. These footprints humble us. They connect us to a deeper, wilder past, a time when the world was filled with wonders we can now only dream of. The ghosts of these giants walk among us still, preserved in the ancient earth, waiting for us to listen to the incredible stories they have to tell. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. It's truly incredible what we can learn from something as simple as a footprint. If you found this as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into our planet's amazing history. Let me know in the comments what you think those overlapping footprints mean. Until next time, stay curious. Hello, and welcome back to our journey into the deep past. Today, we're stepping into Chapter 5, Footprints of Giants and Ghosts. Imagine a world frozen in time, a world where humans walked alongside creatures straight out of legend. This isn't a fantasy novel. This is the reality uncovered at a remarkable archaeological site. In our last episode, we discussed the initial discovery of human footprints, pushing back the timeline of human presence in the Americas. But the story gets even more incredible. As researchers expanded their search, the ground began to reveal a much larger, more complex story. It wasn't just us. We were not alone. Picture this, a vast, muddy landscape, 21,000 years ago. A family makes their way across the terrain, their bare feet pressing into the soft earth. But around them, the ground is stamped with the tracks of true giants. The team found the unmistakable, massive dinner plate-sized prints of Columbian mammoths. These colossal beings, relatives of modern elephants, roamed this very land, their immense weight leaving deep impressions that have miraculously survived for millennia. Can you even comprehend sharing your backyard with a creature that stood over 13 feet tall at the shoulder and weighed more than 10 tons? These weren't just distant figures on the horizon. Their paths literally crossed with our ancestors. Finding these mammoth tracks alongside human ones paints a vivid picture of a Pleistocene safari, a world teeming with megafauna, but the mammoths weren't the only giants. The scientists also identified the paw prints of an animal that has haunted our collective imagination for centuries, the dire wolf. Larger and more robust than any wolf alive today, with a bite force capable of crushing bone, these formidable predators were a real and present danger. Seeing their tracks interspersed with human ones sends a shiver down your spine. It begs the question, were these encounters peaceful, or were they fraught with peril? Was it a hunt, or were the humans the ones being hunted? The presence of dire wolf tracks transforms the scene from a simple migration to a high-stakes drama of survival. Every step our ancestors took could have been shadowed by these powerful hunters. It forces us to reconsider the daily realities of Ice Age life. It wasn't just about finding food and shelter. It was about avoiding becoming food yourself. And then, there's the ghost of the group, a truly bizarre and wonderful creature, the giant ground sloth. Forget the slow, tree-dwelling sloths we know today. These ancient relatives, like the Harlan's ground sloth, could stand as tall as a grizzly bear, weighing over a ton. They were massive herbivores, ambling through the landscape on their hind legs, using their huge claws to pull down branches. Their footprints, distinct and enormous, add another layer of wonder to this prehistoric ecosystem. These creatures, now completely extinct, were a part of the everyday scenery for early Americans. It's a world so different from our own, it's almost impossible to fully grasp. Mammoths, dire wolves, giant sloths, and humans, all sharing the same space, the same resources, the same watering holes. Now, here's where the story becomes truly cinematic. The most breathtaking discovery wasn't just that these tracks existed in the same location, but how they were layered. In several instances, the researchers found human footprints pressed directly inside the larger tracks of a mammoth or a giant sloth. Let's pause and think about what this means. This isn't just coexistence. This is direct interaction. Why would a person deliberately step into the footprint of a giant animal? There are a few fascinating possibilities. One theory is a form of clever tracking. Perhaps a hunter was following a mammoth, using its massive prints to move more easily across difficult terrain, masking their own scent, or simply staying on the trail of their next meal. This suggests a level of hunting sophistication and bravery that is awe-inspiring. Taking on a mammoth with primitive tools would have been one of the most dangerous undertakings imaginable. Another interpretation is more playful, or perhaps practical. Imagine a child seeing the giant, muddy footprint of a sloth and jumping into it for fun. Or perhaps a person used the deep impression to get a firmer footing on slippery ground. It humanizes these ancient people in a profound way. It shows us that they weren't just stoic survivors. They were people who experienced curiosity, playfulness, and ingenuity, just like us. These overlapping prints are narrative gold. They are frozen moments of a 21,000-year-old story. Each set of tracks is a sentence, and where they intersect, a new chapter of the story begins. A human track over a wolf track might tell a tale of a narrow escape. A series of human prints following sloth prints could be the story of a family teaching its children which animals were safe and which were to be avoided. The site is a ghost story written in mud, where the ghosts are these magnificent extinct beasts and the people who walked among them. We can't hear their voices or know their names, but we can follow their footsteps. We can trace their journeys and imagine their lives. The discovery of these intertwined tracks provides irrefutable proof that our ancestors' lives were deeply connected with the giants of the Ice Age. This wasn't a world where humans were separate from nature. They were an integral part of a wild, dynamic, and often dangerous ecosystem. They navigated a landscape ruled by titans, using their intelligence and cooperation to survive and thrive. The footprints of giants and ghosts are not just fossils. They are a direct connection to our own deep history, a powerful reminder of the world we came from and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. What an incredible chapter in this unfolding saga! We're learning that the story of humanity in the Americas is far older, richer, and more dramatic than we ever knew. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration today. If you're as fascinated by this as I am, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter in our investigation. See you next time. Have you ever walked along a beach and looked back at your footprints in the wet sand, knowing the next wave would wash them away? It's a fleeting moment, a temporary mark on the world. But what if your footprints could last for thousands of years? What if a simple walk, a run, or a moment of play could be frozen in time, waiting to tell its story to a future generation? Today, we read journeying back over 100,000 years to a place where this isn't just a what if. It's a reality, preserved in ancient mud. This is the story of the oldest human footprints ever found in North America. A discovery that's rewriting what we thought we knew about the first people to walk this land. Imagine a team of scientists in the stark, beautiful landscape of White Sands National Park in New Mexico. They're not looking for dinosaur bones or glittering minerals. They're looking for ghosts. Ghosts of a time long past, captured not in stories or artifacts, but in the very ground beneath their feet. For years, rumors and occasional discoveries hinted that something special was hidden here. Then, in 2009, a park manager noticed strange dark patches on the ground after a rainstorm. They looked almost human. This was the spark. This was the beginning of a journey into the deep past. The site is a vast flat plain known as a playa. Thousands of years ago, this wasn't a dry, salty expanse. It was the edge of a massive ancient lake called Lake Otero. The shores were muddy, a perfect canvas for preserving impressions. The scientists, led by a team from the U.S. Geological Survey and other institutions, knew they had to be incredibly careful. This wasn't just digging, it was archaeological surgery. They couldn't just shovel away the earth. They had to slice through time itself. Using techniques like ground-penetrating radar, they mapped out what lay beneath the surface. It was like getting a ghostly X-ray of the ancient lakebed. The radar revealed long, winding tracks, crisscrossing each other. The team realized they weren't just looking at a few isolated footprints. They were looking at a superhighway of ancient human and animal activity. The excitement must have been electric. Now came the delicate part, excavating. They began to carefully slice through the layers of sediment, each layer representing a different period in time, like pages in a history book written by the earth itself. As they peeled back the first layers, the shapes became undeniable. These were human footprints. And not just a few. They found dozens, then hundreds. The sheer number was staggering. But what truly brought the scene to life was who these footprints belonged to. They weren't all from adult hunters on a mission. Many of them were small, very small. They belonged to teenagers and children. The scientists could almost see them. Groups of kids, maybe splashing in the shallows, chasing each other along the muddy shore. The tracks weren't just straight lines. They showed runs, sudden stops, quick turns, and even moments of pause. It was a playground, frozen for millennia. One particular set of tracks tells an incredibly vivid story. It's a long, straight trail, over 1.5 miles long. The prints are deep, suggesting a person walking quickly, with purpose. But there's a twist. Inside the larger footprints, every so often, there's another much smaller set of prints. A child's footprints. The evidence points to a parent, likely a mother, carrying a toddler on her hip. The prints show her shifting the child from one side to the other as she walked. You can almost feel the weight, the hurried pace. Why the rush? Well, her path is intersected by the massive tracks of a giant ground sloth and a mammoth. Was she trying to get her child to safety? Was she avoiding these colossal beasts that roam the land? We can only speculate, but the footprints paint a picture of parental care and caution that is deeply, recognizably human. And here's where the story gets even more incredible. The same trackway shows a return journey. The footprints heading back are different. They are shallower, more evenly spaced, and most importantly, the child's footprints are gone. The person was walking alone on the return trip. What happened? Did they drop the child off in a safe place? Were they returning from a successful trip to another camp? The footprints don't give us all the answers, but they give us these intimate, personal questions to ask of our distant ancestors. This isn't just data. It's a human drama etched in mud. Dating these footprints was the next crucial step. And this is where the discovery truly shook the foundations of American archaeology. For decades, the prevailing theory was that humans first arrived in the Americas around 13,000 years ago. But the scientists at White Sands found ancient grass seeds embedded within the footprint layers. Using radiocarbon dating on these seeds, they got a result that was hard to believe. The footprints were between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. This pushed back the timeline of human presence in the Americas by nearly 10,000 years. It meant that people were living, playing, and raising families in New Mexico during the peak of the last ice age, a time when massive ice sheets covered much of the continent. This discovery changes everything. It means we have to rethink the entire story of how and when people first came to this hemisphere. It suggests that humans were far more adaptable and resilient than we ever gave them credit for, thriving in a harsh ice age world filled with megafauna like mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and dire wolves. These weren't just a few struggling bands of pioneers. They were established communities with children, families, and a deep connection to the land they called home. The layers of mud at White Sands are layers of time, and each footprint is a single frozen moment from a life lived long ago. It's a powerful reminder that beneath the surface of the world we see, there are entire other worlds waiting to be discovered, connecting us directly to the footsteps of our oldest ancestors. The story is far from over. Who knows what other secrets are still buried, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey back in time. It's discoveries like these that remind us how much we still have to learn about our own human story. If you found this as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more deep dives into the mysteries of our past. Let me know in the comments what you think about this discovery. Until next time, stay curious. Have you ever stood on a beach, looked down at your footprints in the sand, and watched as the waves wash them away in mere seconds? It's a fleeting moment, a temporary mark on the world. Now, imagine a set of footprints not washed away by the next tide, but preserved for thousands of years. What story would they tell? Who left them? And the biggest question of all, how on earth do you figure out how old they are? This is the story of a scientific detective case that pushed the boundaries of what we thought we knew about our own history. It's a story that begins with a chance discovery and ends with a revelation that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Welcome to Chapter 7. Dating the Impossible. Picture this, a vast, windswept landscape. Researchers are carefully examining a series of ancient footprints, perfectly preserved in what was once soft mud. These aren't just random marks. They're a snapshot of life, frozen in time. You can almost feel the presence of the people who made them, men, women, and even children, walking across this land long, long ago. But for scientists, long, long ago isn't good enough. They need a number, a date. Without a precise age, these footprints are just a fascinating curiosity. With a date, they become a vital piece of the human story. The problem was, how do you date a hole in the ground? You can't date the mud itself with any real accuracy. The usual methods just wouldn't work here. The team was faced with a monumental challenge, a puzzle that seemed, for a moment, utterly unsolvable. Just when it seemed like they had hit a dead end, a glimmer of hope appeared, and it came from a very unexpected source. As the researchers meticulously cleaned and examined the layers of sediment between the footprints, they noticed something tiny. Speckled throughout the hardened mud were minuscule seeds. They were dark, oval-shaped, and incredibly well-preserved. To the untrained eye, they might look like nothing more than dirt. But to a trained botanist, they were a clue, a time capsule waiting to be opened. The team carefully extracted these seeds, handling them like precious jewels. They were identified as belonging to a species of aquatic plant called *Rupia serosa*, commonly known as ditch grass. This unassuming little plant, which still grows in brackish waters today, was about to become the key that would unlock this entire mystery. The scientists realized that if they could date the seeds, they could date the footprints. Why? Because these seeds were in the same layer of mud that the footprints were pressed into. They were deposited at the same time. The people who left those tracks were walking on, or right next to, these very seeds. The excitement in the lab must have been palpable. They had found their key. The method they chose to date these seeds is a cornerstone of modern archaeology, radiocarbon dating. Let's break down how this amazing technology works, because it's pure genius. Every living thing on Earth, plants, animals, you, me, absorbs carbon from the atmosphere. Most of this carbon is a stable form called carbon-12, but a tiny, tiny fraction is an unstable, radioactive version called carbon-14. As long as an organism is alive, it's constantly exchanging carbon with the environment, so the ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-14 in its body stays the same as the ratio in the atmosphere. But the moment that organism dies, the moment our little *Rupia* plant shed its seed, that exchange stops. From that point on, the unstable carbon-14 begins to decay at a very predictable rate. It's like a cosmic clock that starts ticking at the moment of death. By measuring how much carbon-14 is left in an organic sample, like one of our seeds, and comparing it to the amount of stable carbon-12, scientists can calculate how long it's been since that organism died. This process is incredibly precise, but it requires painstaking work. The seeds had to be cleaned of all contamination, converted into pure carbon, and then analyzed in a massive machine called an accelerator mass spectrometer. The team held their breath as they waited for the results. What would the cosmic clock reveal? The results came back, and they were astonishing. Not just interesting, not just old, but truly mind-blowingly ancient. The radiocarbon dating placed the seeds, and therefore the footprints, at approximately 23,000 years old. Let that sink in. 23,000 years. This wasn't just a new record. It completely rewrote the timeline of human presence in the Americas. For decades, the prevailing theory was that the first humans arrived in North America around 13,000 to 16,000 years ago, after the massive ice sheets that covered the continent began to melt, opening up a corridor for migration. This discovery didn't just push that date back by a little bit. It shattered the old timeline by nearly 10,000 years. It meant that people were living in North America during the last glacial maximum, the absolute peak of the Ice Age, a time when much of the continent was buried under miles of ice. It was a period previously thought to be completely inhospitable. Who were these people? How did they get there? How did they survive in such a harsh, frozen world? The footprints suddenly transformed from a simple archaeological site into evidence of a lost chapter of human history. This revelation, as you can imagine, was met with both excitement and intense skepticism. In science, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and this was about as extraordinary as it gets. Critics immediately began to question the findings. Could the radiocarbon dates be wrong? One major concern was what's known as the old carbon effect. *rupia* plants grow in water, and it's possible for ancient carbon dissolved in that water from rocks like limestone to be absorbed by the plant. If this happened, the seeds would appear older than they actually are. To address the skepticism, the researchers needed more than just one line of evidence. They needed to build a rock-solid case, so they returned to the site and expanded their search. Their goal was to find a different type of organic material from the same footprint layer to date something that didn't come from an aquatic environment. This would eliminate the old carbon reservoir effect as a potential problem. They began a new, even more meticulous excavation, and their persistence paid off. This time they found something different. Terrestrial pollen. Specifically, pollen from pine and fir trees that would have been growing on dry land near the ancient lake where the footprints were made. Pollen, carried by the wind, would have settled on the mudflats at the same time as the seeds, and at the same time the people were walking there. Because these trees grew on land, their pollen would only contain carbon from the atmosphere, providing a perfect cross-check for the dates from the aquatic seeds. It was a brilliant strategy. They had found their independent line of evidence. Now they had to run the tests all over again. The pollen samples were sent to the lab for another round of radiocarbon dating. This was the moment of truth. If the pollen dates matched the seed dates, their controversial theory would be powerfully supported. If they didn't match, the whole discovery could fall apart. The wait for the results must have been agonizing. When the numbers finally came in, they showed a perfect match. The pollen was also dated to be around 23,000 years old. It was a stunning confirmation. Two different types of organic material, one aquatic and one terrestrial, both taken from the exact same geological layer, were telling the exact same story. The case was becoming airtight. The people who left those footprints were indeed living in North America during the height of the last ice age. The impossible date was, it turned out, entirely possible. It was a triumph of careful, methodical, and persistent scientific inquiry. The footprints were no longer just a controversial anomaly. They were a confirmed fact of human history. So what does this all mean? It means we have to rethink everything we thought we knew about the peopling of the Americas. The old story of hunters chasing mammoths across a land bridge and down an ice-free corridor is, at best, only part of the story, and perhaps not even the beginning of it. These 23,000-year-old footprints suggest a much earlier, more complex migration. They raise fascinating questions. If people were already south of the massive ice sheets during the glacial maximum, they must have arrived long before that, when a path was still open. Or perhaps they didn't come overland at all. Maybe they traveled down the coast in boats, a kelp highway rich in marine resources. These footprints don't just give us an answer. They open up a dozen new mysteries. They paint a picture of our ancestors not as timid newcomers, but as incredibly resilient and adaptable pioneers who thrived in a world we can barely imagine. They were innovators, explorers, and survivors of the highest order. This entire discovery, from the first glimpse of a footprint to the final confirmation from the pollen, is a testament to the power of the scientific method. It shows how even the smallest clues, a tiny seed, a grain of pollen, can be used to unlock the grandest stories of our past. It's a reminder that history is not a static book, but a dynamic field of discovery. constantly being updated and rewritten as new evidence comes to light. And it all started with a simple, fundamental question: how old is this? Thanks to the ingenuity of these researchers and the beautiful precision of radiocarbon dating, we now have an answer that has forever changed our understanding of our own human journey. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible scientific detective story. If you found this as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more deep dives into the mysteries of our world. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What does this discovery mean to you? Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter. For most of the 20th century, a single story dominated our understanding of how humans first came to the Americas. It was a neat, tidy narrative, one you probably learned in school. We call it the Clovis first theory. The idea was simple. Around 13,000 years ago, as the last great ice age began to wane, massive continental ice sheets that had covered North America started to melt. This melting opened up an ice-free corridor, a long, narrow pathway stretching from Alaska down into what is now the United States. Through this corridor, the first Americans, a group of big-game hunters we call the Clovis people, supposedly ventured south, following herds of mammoths and other megafauna. It was a compelling story, supported by a distinct and beautiful piece of technology, the Clovis point. These masterfully crafted spearheads, with their characteristic fluted base, were found scattered across North America, from coast to coast. For decades, they were the oldest solid evidence of human presence on the continent. Archaeologists believed that wherever you found a Clovis point, you were looking at the frontier of human settlement. The timing seemed perfect. The geological evidence for the ice-free corridor lined up with the radiocarbon dates of the earliest Clovis sites. It all fit together so well that for a long time, the scientific community treated Clovis first, not as a theory, but as fact. Any discovery that seemed to predate Clovis was met with intense skepticism and often outright dismissal. Archaeologists who dared to suggest an earlier arrival were often professionally sidelined. Their evidence was scrutinized to an almost impossible degree. Was the dating method flawed? Could the artifacts have been displaced from a higher, younger layer of soil? For any pre-Clovis site to be accepted, it had to have what we call impeccable stratigraphy, a perfectly layered cake of soil where artifacts were found sealed in their original, undisturbed context. It was an incredibly high bar to clear, and for a long time no site could definitively meet the challenge. The Clovis consensus held firm, like a dam holding back a trickle of contradictory data. But trickles, if they persist, can become streams, and streams can become floods that eventually break the dam. Over the years, more and more sites began to emerge that just didn't fit the Clovis timeline. Places like the Monte Verde site in Chile, thousands of miles south of the ice-free corridor, showed evidence of human occupation at least 1,000 years before Clovis. There was the Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania and the Cactus Hill site in Virginia, both yielding dates that pushed back the clock. Each discovery chipped away at the certainty of the Clovis first model. How could people be in southern Chile a millennium before the supposed entry point in the north was even open? The math just didn't add up. The scientific community began to polarize. On one side were the staunch defenders of the traditional model, and on the other, a growing group of researchers arguing that the story was far more complex. They proposed alternative migration routes, like a coastal journey down the Pacific with people using boats to hop between ice-free pockets of land and islands. This Kelp Highway hypothesis could explain how people bypassed the ice sheets and reached South America so early. The debate raged on for years, a fascinating and sometimes contentious period in American archaeology. The dam was cracking, but it hadn't broken yet. It would take something truly undeniable, something visceral and profoundly human to shatter the myth once and for all. And then, it happened. In the stark, windswept landscape of White Sands National Park in New Mexico, a discovery was made that would rewrite our history books. It wasn't a spear point or a stone tool. It was something far more personal and evocative: footprints. Preserved in the ancient mud of a long-vanished lakebed were thousands of human footprints, left by men, women, and most remarkably, children. These weren't just artifacts. They were frozen moments in time, snapshots of daily life from the deep past. You could see the tracks of a mother carrying a toddler, setting the child down, and picking it up again. You could see teenagers splashing and playing. You could see the long, determined strides of hunters. It was a ghost story written in the earth. But the most revolutionary aspect of the White Sands footprints was their age. Using multiple, rigorous dating methods, scientists analyzed the layers of sediment above and below the tracks. They dated the seeds of aquatic plants that were trapped in the same layers as the footprints. The results were staggering and unambiguous. The footprints were between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. Let that sink in. This wasn't a mere 1,000 years before Clovis. This was a full 10,000 years earlier. This meant that humans were walking, living, and raising families in North America during the last glacial maximum, the absolute peak of the Ice Age, when the great ice sheets were at their thickest and most impassable. The implications were earth-shattering. The Clovis first theory wasn't just wrong, it was spectacularly wrong. The entire timeline of human migration to the Americas had to be torn up and rewritten. The people of White Sands were not recent arrivals who slipped through a melting corridor. They had been here for millennia, living in a world we can barely imagine, a world where glaciers loomed to the north and giant sloths and mammoths roamed the landscape. The White Sands footprints provided the definitive knockout blow to the old consensus. They were the undeniable proof that the story of the first Americans was far older, deeper, and more mysterious than we ever thought possible. The narrative we now embrace is one of multiple migrations, perhaps over many thousands of years, using different routes. The first pioneers may have come down the coast, others may have found different paths. The Clovis people were not the first Americans. They were just one chapter in a much longer saga. This shift in thinking has opened up a whole new world of research. Archaeologists are now looking for evidence in places they once ignored, re-examining old sites with new eyes and piecing together a more nuanced and accurate picture of the past. The story of the White Sands footprints is a powerful reminder that science is a process of discovery, not a set of unchanging facts. It shows us that even the most entrenched theories can fall in the face of new evidence. And it gives us a profound tangible connection to our most distant ancestors, not as abstract figures but as real people who walked the same earth we do, leaving their stories for us to find, printed in the sands of time. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more deep dives into our shared human story. We'll see you in the next video. Upbeat, intriguing music fades in and then lowers to a background hum. Hello and welcome back to our deep dive into one of the most groundbreaking discoveries in human history. In our last chapter, we talked about the initial dating of those incredible footprints, placing humans in North America around 23,000 years ago, a figure that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. It was a radical idea, pushing back the timeline of human arrival by thousands of years. And with any radical idea comes a healthy dose of skepticism. Today, in Chapter 10, we're exploring how science answered that skepticism, and how these dates were put to the test once again. So let's set the scene. The initial results are out, based on radiocarbon dating of ditch grass seeds found layered with the footprints. 23,000 years old. For many archaeologists, this number just seemed wrong. It was too old. The established consensus, built over decades of research, pointed to an arrival closer to 13,000 or maybe 16,000 years ago. So the questions started flying. How could we be sure about those seeds? The primary concern was contamination. Skeptics argued that perhaps the seeds weren't as old as the footprints themselves. One theory was the reservoir effect. This happens when aquatic plants, like the ditch grass used for dating, absorb old, dissolved carbon from the water. This old carbon can make the plant seem ancient when it's actually much younger. It's like the plant is drinking from a fossil water source, skewing the radiocarbon date and making it appear thousands of years older than it really is. It was a valid and important criticism. Science isn't about just accepting the first result. It's about rigorously testing it from every angle. Another possibility raised by critics was that the seeds were uneven from the same time as the footprints. They suggested that maybe older seeds from deeper, more ancient layers of sediment had somehow been washed into the footprint layers by water or wind. Imagine a heavy rainstorm eroding an older hillside and carrying those ancient seeds down into the newer, softer mud where the footprints were made. If that were the case, we wouldn't be dating the footprints at all. We'd be dating much older, unrelated material. The layers seemed clear, but was it possible they had been mixed up over the millennia? These weren't just random doubts. They were crucial scientific questions that needed answers. If this discovery was going to rewrite the textbooks, it had to withstand the toughest scrutiny imaginable. The team knew they couldn't just stand by their initial findings. They had to go back. They needed more evidence from different sources, using different methods. The scientific process was in full swing, and the story of these ancient footprints was far from over. So, with these doubts hanging in the air, the team of scientists, led by the U.S. Geological Survey, knew they had to return to the site. Their mission was clear: find new, independent lines of evidence to either confirm or refute their original findings. They couldn't rely on the same type of seeds again. They needed something entirely different. The goal was to eliminate the possibility of the reservoir effect and the contamination argument. And so, in 2023, they returned to the windswept plains of white sands, ready to dig deeper and apply cutting-edge dating techniques. This time, they weren't just looking for seeds. They were hunting for two very different types of chronological clues hidden within the same sediment layers: ancient pine pollen and grains of quartz sand. Each of these would provide a completely separate time stamp, an independent clock against which they could check their original results. First, let's talk about the pollen. Why pollen? Well, unlike the aquatic ditch grass, the pollen they were after came from terrestrial plants, specifically conifers like pine trees. These trees grow on land and get their carbon directly from the atmosphere, not from the water. This is a crucial distinction. By dating pollen from land-based trees, they could completely bypass the reservoir effect criticism. There was no ancient carbon-filled water source to contaminate these tiny grains. If the radiocarbon date from the pine pollen matched the date from the aquatic seeds, it would be powerful evidence that the original dates were, in fact, accurate. Extracting enough pollen for dating is an incredibly meticulous process. We're talking about microscopic grains that have been preserved in sediment for over 20,000 years. It requires careful separation and cleaning to ensure that you are only dating the pollen itself. It's a testament to the precision of modern science. The team successfully isolated about 75,000 pollen grains, a tiny sample weighing less than a milligram, but packed with information. But they didn't stop there. They wanted a third, completely independent method, one that didn't rely on radiocarbon dating at all. This is where the sand comes in. They focused on quartz sand grains that were found within the exact same footprint layers. For this, they used a fascinating technique called optically stimulated luminescence, or OSL for short. Now, OSL sounds complex, but the principle is beautifully simple. Think of each grain of sand as a tiny rechargeable battery. While it's buried underground, away from sunlight, it absorbs natural background radiation from the surrounding soil, slowly building up an energy charge. The longer it's buried, the more charge it accumulates. The magic happens when that grain of sand is exposed to light. Sunlight completely drains the battery, resetting the clock to zero. So the OSL technique measures the last time a grain of sand saw the sun. For the sand in the footprint layers, that last exposure to sunlight would have been right before it was buried by the next layer of sediment. Here's how it works in the lab. The scientists have to collect their sand samples in complete darkness to avoid accidentally resetting the clock. Back in the lab, still in the dark, they expose the individual quartz grains to a specific wavelength of light. This controlled light stimulation causes the sand grain to release its stored energy in the form of a tiny flash of light, its luminescence. By measuring the intensity of that flash, they can calculate how much energy the grain had stored up, which in turn tells them exactly how long it's been buried in darkness. It's like reading a clock that has been ticking away silently underground for millennia. It's an entirely different physical process from radiocarbon dating, which measures radioactive decay. It was the perfect independent cross-check. They now had three separate clocks: the original aquatic seeds, the terrestrial pine pollen, and the quartz sand grains. All that was left was to see if they all told the same time. The moment of truth arrived. The results from the new tests started coming in. First, the radiocarbon dating of the conifer pollen. The age, it landed squarely in the same range as the original seeds, pointing to an age of around 22,000 to 23,000 years. This was huge. By using terrestrial pollen, they had effectively neutralized the main criticism about the aquatic reservoir effect. The atmospheric carbon clock matched the aquatic carbon clock. This strongly suggested that the water in the ancient lake wasn't contaminated with old carbon after all, and the initial seed dates were reliable. One major skeptical hurdle had been cleared. But the final confirmation, the nail in the coffin for the doubters, came from the OSL dating. Remember, the OSL technique is completely independent of carbon dating. It measures a different physical phenomenon entirely: how long the sand has been buried away from sunlight. The scientists analyzed the quartz grains taken from the human footprint layers. The findings were staggering. The OSL dating returned an age of approximately 21,500 years, with a margin of error of about 1,000 years. It was a perfect match. 3 different dating methods, using 3 different types of materials: aquatic seeds, terrestrial pollen, and mineral sand grains, all converged on the same astonishing conclusion. Humans were walking through white sands, leaving these very footprints. Between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago, the new evidence was robust, multifaceted, and compelling. The skepticism had served its purpose. It had pushed the scientists to produce an even stronger, more undeniable case. The new 2023 study didn't just support the original claim. It cemented it. The timeline of human history in the Americas had officially been rewritten, not by one controversial finding, but by a convergence of rigorous, repeatable, and independent scientific evidence. The footprints were real, and they were ancient. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible scientific detective story. It's a powerful reminder that science is a process of questioning, testing, and retesting to get closer to the truth. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button, and consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter in our journey. We'd love to have you with us. See you next time. Imagine walking on a beach, the wet sand squishing between your toes. You leave behind a trail of footprints, a temporary record of your journey. Now imagine those footprints being preserved not for a few hours, but for thousands, even millions of years. This isn't science fiction. It's the incredible reality of paleoanthropology, and it's how we meet the ghosts of our ancient past. Today we're stepping back in time to meet the people who left the prints. Who are they? We don't know their names. They didn't leave behind grand monuments or written histories. In many cases, we don't even find their tools or the remnants of their homes. All that remains is this simple, profoundly human trace. Their footprints, fossilized in what was once soft, wet ground. These aren't just random marks. They are stories etched in stone. They tell us about families, about children and mothers, about groups of individuals moving together across a long-vanished landscape. Let's travel to Letoli in Tanzania. Around 3.6 million years ago, a nearby volcano erupted, blanketing the land in a fine layer of ash. Then the rains came, turning that ash into a muddy, cement-like surface. And across this surface, at least 3 of our very early ancestors, likely Australopithecus afarensis, the same species as the famous Lucy skeleton, walked. For millions of years, their tracks were hidden until they were discovered in the 1970s. These aren't just any footprints. They are astonishingly clear. We can see the shape of the foot, the arch, the way the big toe aligned with the other toes, all hallmarks of bipedalism, of walking upright on 2 legs. This was a monumental moment in human evolution, and here we have a literal snapshot of it. The tracks show 2 individuals walking side by side, with a third, smaller individual walking in the footsteps of one of the larger ones. It's an image that sparks the imagination. Was it a family? Perhaps a father and mother, with their child carefully stepping in a parent's tracks? We can almost feel their presence, their slow, deliberate pace across that ashen plain. We can infer their height, their weight, and their gait, all from these simple impressions. It's the oldest, most direct evidence we have of our ancestors walking upright, a behavior that freed our hands and set us on the path to becoming who we are today. Now, let's journey forward, in time and across the globe, to White Sands National Park in New Mexico. Here, a much more recent, yet equally breathtaking story unfolds. Discovered just a few years ago, these tracks date back around 23,000 years, placing humans in the Americas much earlier than many scientists previously thought. And the story they tell is incredibly moving. One set of tracks, stretching for nearly a mile, shows a person, most likely a woman, walking with purpose. The footprints are long and straight, suggesting a quick pace. But what makes them so special is that intermittently, the prints widen and slip, as if the person was carrying a heavy, wriggling load. And nested inside these larger prints, and sometimes beside them, are the tiny tracks of a toddler, between 2 and 3 years old. The evidence paints a vivid picture. a mother carrying her child, setting them down to play for a moment, then picking them up again to continue the journey. You can almost hear the laughter or the cries. You can feel the weight of the child, the ache in the mother's arms. It's a universal scene of parenthood, played out during the last ice age. Intriguingly, the tracks show that she made a return journey a few hours later, this time without the child. Her footprints are more uniform, her pace faster. Where was she going? What dangers did she face? We can only speculate, but these footprints connect us to her on a deeply emotional level. It's not just this one journey. The white sand site is a tapestry of ancient life. We see tracks of teenagers and children, groups of people moving together. Some prints are small, just a few inches long, suggesting kids were running and splashing through shallow water at the edge of a now extinct lake, while the adults followed nearby. This wasn't a site of migration or hunting. It was a place where people lived, where children played. It challenges the old image of grim, stoic hunters constantly battling for survival. These were people with complex social lives, people who cared for their young, who allowed their children the freedom to be children. These prints show us the playful side of our Ice Age ancestors. What's incredible is how these footprints force us to reconsider our connection to the past. When we look at a skull or a stone tool, there's a sense of distance. It's an object, a scientific specimen. But a footprint, that's different. It's a moment, a fleeting action frozen in time. You can almost place your own foot inside the ancient print and feel a direct physical link to the person who made it. You can sense their movement, their humanity. They were not abstract concepts from a textbook. They were living, breathing individuals with families, fears, and hopes. Just like us. They walked across landscapes teeming with mammoths, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats. We even find tracks where human and animal paths cross, moments of potential tension or observation frozen for eternity. Did a hunter stalk a giant sloth? Did a family cautiously watch a herd of mammoths from a distance? These prints provide tantalizing clues to the rich, dynamic ecosystem our ancestors inhabited. They weren't just surviving in this world. They were an integral part of it. From the volcanic ash of Africa to the gypsum sands of North America, these fossilized footprints are perhaps the most personal relics our ancestors left behind. They are a quiet, humble, yet powerful testament to their existence. They remind us that before the empires, the cities, and the written word, there were families walking together, mothers carrying their children, and kids running through the mud. They are the silent stories of our shared human journey, waiting for us to listen with our eyes and walk for a moment, in their shoes. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story as moving as I do, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more explorations into our incredible past. What do these footprints make you think of? Let me know in the comments below. See you next time. Intro music begins and fades slightly into the background. Hello, and welcome back to our journey through time. Today, we're re-venturing into one of the most dramatic and challenging periods in human history. The Ice Age. Forget everything you think you know from cartoons and movies. This was a world of breathtaking beauty and immense danger, a world that forged our ancestors into the resilient, adaptable people we are today. So grab a warm blanket and let's step back in time to a world of ice and giants. Slight pause, music shifts. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a world unlike any other. The air is crisp and cold, carrying a wind that sweeps relentlessly across vast open landscapes. There are no sprawling cities, no highways, just endless stretches of tundra grass, swaying like a golden ocean under a pale, distant sun. This is the world our ancestors called home during the Pleistocene epoch, the Great Ice Age. It wasn't a constant, frozen wasteland. It was a dynamic period of fluctuating climates, with massive glaciers advancing and retreating, reshaping the very continents. When we say Ice Age, we often picture a world completely covered in ice, but that's only part of the story. Massive ice sheets, some several kilometers thick, did cover large parts of North America, Europe, and Asia. But beyond the ice, vast ecosystems thrived. These were the Mammoth Steppes, cold, dry, and surprisingly full of life. Think of it as a Serengeti of the north, but instead of lions and elephants, the landscape was ruled by a caste of incredible megafauna. The undisputed kings of this world were the woolly mammoths. These weren't just hairy elephants. They were colossal beings with long, curved tusks they used to sweep away snow and defend against predators. Can you imagine the ground trembling as a herd of these giants passed by, their deep rumbles echoing across the plains? They were a constant presence, a source of awe, fear, and, for our ancestors, a vital resource. A single mammoth could provide food for a group for weeks, along with bones for tools and shelters and thick hides for clothing. But the mammoths weren't alone. Roaming alongside them were woolly rhinoceroses, powerful and armored, and giant deer with antlers spanning up to 12 feet wide. In the Americas, the scene was even more alien. Giant ground sloths, some as tall as a giraffe when standing on their hind legs, lumbered through the woodlands, peacefully munching on leaves. There were glyptodonts, armadillo-like creatures the size of a small car, and the fearsome saber-toothed cats, like Smilodon, with their iconic dagger-like canine teeth. This was a world of giants, a landscape teeming with creatures that now exist only in fossils and our imaginations. And amidst these colossal beasts, there was us, Homo sapiens *. We were not the strongest, not the fastest, and certainly not the biggest, so how did we survive? How did we go from being a vulnerable species on the plains to the planet's dominant force? The answer lies in our greatest asset, our minds. Survival in the Ice Age was a masterclass in ingenuity and cooperation. Let's talk about shelter. Our ancestors didn't have the luxury of permanent homes. They were often nomadic, following the great herds. They sought refuge in natural caves, which offered protection from the biting wind and roaming predators. But where caves weren't available, they built their own. Archaeologists have found incredible remains of huts constructed from mammoth bones and tusks, forming a sturdy framework that was then covered with animal hides. Inside, a central hearth would provide warmth, light, and a place to cook and socialize. This hearth was the heart of the community, a beacon of human warmth against the vast, cold darkness. Clothing was just as crucial. Forget the simple fur loincloths you see in movies. Ice Age tailoring was sophisticated. Using sharp flint tools and bone needles, our ancestors meticulously stitched together animal hides. They knew which furs were warmest and how to treat the skins to make them soft and pliable. They created layered outfits, including trousers, parkas with hoods, mittens, and insulated footwear, a complete wardrobe designed to withstand sub-zero temperatures. The evidence is in the tools they left behind and the art they created, showing figures bundled up against the cold. Of course, the most pressing challenge was finding food. Ice Age humans were expert hunter-gatherers. Hunting a mammoth or a bison was no small feat. It wasn't about a single hero taking down a giant. It was a highly coordinated group effort. They used their intelligence to their advantage. They understood animal behavior, migration patterns, and the lay of the land. They would drive herds towards cliffs or into narrow ravines, using the landscape itself as a weapon. Their toolkit was a testament to their skill. The iconic weapon of the age was the spear, but they perfected it with the invention of the atlatl, or spear thrower. This simple but brilliant device acted as an extension of the arm, allowing a hunter to launch a spear with incredible force and accuracy from a safe distance. It was a game-changer, leveling the playing field between humans and the giant beasts they hunted. Beyond the big game, they also hunted smaller animals, fished in icy rivers, and gathered whatever edible plants they could find, from roots and berries to hardy grains. Every calorie counted. But life wasn't just a grim struggle for survival. Our Ice Age ancestors had rich social and cultural lives. They were artists, thinkers, and storytellers. This is perhaps the most astonishing revelation from this period. Deep within caves like Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain, they left behind a breathtaking legacy. Using mineral pigments like ochre and charcoal, they painted stunningly realistic images of the animals that dominated their world: horses, bison, mammoths, and lions. Why did they do this? Were these hunting magic meant to ensure a successful hunt? Were they records of past events? Or were they part of sacred rituals, stories told by flickering firelight in the deep, silent darkness of the earth? We may never know for sure, but what's undeniable is the skill and sensitivity behind these paintings. They show a deep connection to and respect for the natural world. These weren't just animals to them. They were powerful forces, fellow inhabitants of their world, worthy of being immortalized in art. Beyond painting, they carved. They created small, intricate sculptures from bone, ivory, and stone. The famous Venus figurines, with their exaggerated features, are found across Europe and suggest a shared system of beliefs, perhaps related to fertility and survival. They crafted musical instruments, like flutes made from bird bones, filling their shelters with music. They adorned themselves with jewelry made of shells, animal teeth, and carved ivory beads. These were not primitive brutes. They were people like us, with a need for beauty, for connection, and for meaning. One of the most powerful windows into their world comes from a set of fossilized footprints discovered at White Sands National Park in New Mexico. Dated to around 23,000 years ago, these tracks tell a poignant story. They show a teenager, likely a girl, walking for over a mile with a toddler on her hip. You can see how her footprints deepen and slip in the mud where she sets the child down, how the child's own tiny footprints appear alongside hers, and then disappear as she picks the child back up. On the return journey, her tracks are alone, more uniform and quicker, her burden gone. Imagine that moment. A young person, carrying a child, hurrying across a landscape where giant sloths and mammoths roamed. It's a scene of everyday life, of care and responsibility, captured for millennia. It reminds us that behind the epic tales of mammoth hunts and survival against the odds were real human moments, moments of tenderness and love. It connects us to them on the most fundamental human level. The Ice Age world began to change around 12,000 years ago. The climate warmed, the great glaciers retreated, and the ecosystems shifted. The vast mammoth steppes gave way to forests. This climate change, coupled with the relentless hunting pressure from our highly efficient ancestors, led to the extinction of most of the megafauna. The mammoths, the saber-toothed cats, and the giant sloths vanished forever. This was a profound transformation. The world our ancestors had known for tens of thousands of years was gone. They had to adapt once again, learning to hunt in the dense new forests, rely more on fish and smaller game, and explore new plant resources. This period of adaptation would ultimately pave the way for the next great revolution in human history, the invention of agriculture. But that's a story for another time. What we learn from the Ice Age is a story of incredible resilience. It teaches us that faced with immense challenges, humanity survived and thrived not through brute force, but through intelligence, cooperation, and creativity. Our ancestors who lived through this frozen world passed down a legacy that is coded into our very DNA. The ability to innovate, to form strong communities, and to find beauty and meaning even in the harshest of conditions. When we look at the art of Lascaux or the footprints at White Sands, we are looking at the dawn of our own story. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back to the Ice Age. As a powerful reminder of where we come from and the incredible journey our species has taken. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more adventures into the past. Let me know in the comments which Ice Age creature you find the most amazing. Until next time, stay curious. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating and hotly debated topics in human history, the peopling of the Americas. For decades, the story seemed pretty straightforward. But a groundbreaking discovery in New Mexico has thrown a massive wrench into the works, forcing us to ask a monumental question. If humans were in the heart of North America 21,000 years ago, how on earth did they get there? For the longest time, the prevailing theory was the Clovis first model. The idea was that the first Americans, known as the Clovis people, crossed a land bridge called Beringia from Siberia into Alaska around 13,000 years ago. As the massive ice sheets covering North America began to melt, an ice-free corridor opened up, allowing these big-game hunters to travel south and populate the continents. It was a neat, tidy story that held sway for most of the 20th century. Archaeologists found their distinctive fluted spear points all across North America, and it all seemed to fit. But science is all about questioning and re-evaluating. And for years, whispers of pre-Clovis, sites locations that seemed to be older than 13,000 years lingered on the fringes of archaeology. Sites like Monte Verde in Chile, dated to over 14,500 years ago, were fiercely debated. But even these didn't completely shatter the timeline. They just pushed it back a little. Then came White Sands. In White Sands National Park, New Mexico, researchers found something truly astonishing: fossilized human footprints. These weren't just any footprints. They were preserved in layers of sediment between layers of ancient seeds, which could be accurately radiocarbon dated. The results were staggering. The footprints were between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. Let that sink in. This wasn't just 1,000 years before Clovis. This was a whopping 10,000 years earlier, 10 millennia. This discovery places humans in the American Southwest during the last glacial maximum, the absolute peak of the last ice age. This is a complete game changer. Why? Because during the last glacial maximum, those massive ice sheets, the Laurentide and Cordilleran, were at their thickest. They stretched across all of Canada, meeting in the middle. That ice-free corridor the Clovis people supposedly used? It simply didn't exist 21,000 years ago. It was a solid, impenetrable wall of ice, kilometers thick. So if the front door was locked, how did people get inside? This is Chapter 13 in the story of humanity, the great migration question that we are now forced to answer. This leaves us with two primary mind-bending possibilities. The first one is the coastal migration theory, which has been gaining a lot of traction. The idea is that instead of walking through the interior, early humans traveled down the Pacific coast. They would have been a maritime people using small boats to hop from island to island and along the coastal shoreline, an environment often called the Kelp Highway. This route would have been rich in resources: fish, shellfish, seals, seabirds, and edible seaweed. It would have been a much more reliable and resource-rich path than the barren tundra of the interior. The problem with proving the coastal route is that the ancient coastlines from 21,000 years ago are now deep underwater. As the glaciers melted, sea levels rose by more than 120 meters, or nearly 400 feet, submerging any coastal campsites, tools, or evidence of this epic journey. So, direct archaeological proof is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to find. We have to rely on indirect evidence, like finding early sites on coastal islands that were never connected to the mainland, such as the Channel Islands off California. And while we have found evidence of early maritime cultures there, getting definitive proof from the last glacial maximum is a huge challenge. But what if they didn't take the coastal route? What if there was another way? This brings us to our second possibility, which is perhaps even more radical. What if the inland route, that ice-free corridor, opened up much, much earlier than we ever believed possible? Or what if there were temporary, traversable gaps within the ice sheets themselves? This is a more speculative idea, but we can't rule it out. Our understanding of glacial dynamics is constantly evolving. Perhaps there were periods of brief warming that created temporary passages. Or maybe there were nunataks, high-altitude landmasses that poked through the ice, creating potential refuges or stepping stones. This would have been an incredibly harsh journey. We're talking about traversing a landscape of ice and wind with limited resources. These people would have needed exceptional survival skills, clothing, and technology to make it through. They would have been true Ice Age pioneers in every sense of the word. Finding evidence for this would mean looking for ancient human sites within the boundaries of where that ice-free corridor once was, but at much deeper, older geological layers. It's a monumental task, but the White Sands footprints demand that we look. So, where does this leave us? We're in a thrilling new era of American archaeology. The old simple story is gone, replaced by a much more complex and fascinating puzzle. Were the first Americans Ice Age mariners navigating the treacherous Pacific coast in small watercraft? Or were they incredibly hardy inland explorers who found a way through a seemingly impassable wall of ice long before we thought it was possible? It's also possible that both are true. Maybe there wasn't just one great migration, but multiple waves of people arriving at different times using different routes. The human story is rarely simple. The discovery at White Sands hasn't given us the final answer, but it has given us a much more profound question. It forces us to rethink the ingenuity, resilience, and incredible capacity for exploration of our ancient ancestors. They weren't just following herds. They were actively exploring and settling a new world under the most extreme conditions imaginable. The search for answers is on. Archaeologists, geneticists, geologists, and paleoclimatologists are all working together, re-examining old sites and searching for new clues that can help us piece together this incredible story. From the submerged coastlines of the Pacific to the deep sediments of the continental interior, the next big discovery could be anywhere. It's a reminder that our own history is still being written and the past has many more secrets to reveal. What do you think? Are you on Team Coastal Route or Team Inland Passage? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. It's an amazing time to be following this science. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. We'll see you in the next video. Have you ever stood on a beach, looked back at your footprints in the sand, and watched as the waves washed them away? It's a fleeting moment, a temporary mark on the world. But what if I told you that some footprints have survived not just for minutes but for millions of years? What if these ancient marks could act as a time machine, transporting us back to the very dawn of humanity? Today, we're embarking on an incredible journey, stepping into the shoes, or rather, the bare feet of our earliest ancestors. We're exploring Chapter 14 of our human story, Footprints as Time Machines. Let's start in Lutoli, Tanzania. Imagine a landscape dominated by a smoldering volcano, sediment. It's 3.6 million years ago. A light rain of volcanic ash begins to fall, blanketing the ground like a gray, powdery snow. It's into this fresh layer of ash that three individuals, our distant relatives, Australopithecus afarensis, begin to walk. They weren't alone. The world around them was teeming with ancient life: three-toed horses, proto-giraffes, and saber-toothed cats. These weren't just random wanderers. Their tracks tell a story of purpose and social connection. The most famous of these is the Lutoli trackway. It preserves the footprints of what most scientists believe was a small group. A larger individual, likely a male, walks alongside a smaller one, perhaps a female. And intriguingly, a third, even smaller individual seems to be walking in the exact footprints of the larger one. Why? Was it a child playing a game? Or was it to make the difficult trek through the soft ash a little easier? This simple act, frozen in time, gives us a profound glimpse into early hominin behavior. It suggests family units, social bonds, and even a moment of playfulness or practicality. These aren't just fossils. They're the earliest evidence of a family walk. Every print is a moment. One step, one heartbeat, one human ancestor alive in a world so different, yet still recognizable. But how did these incredibly delicate impressions survive? It's a miracle of preservation. After our ancestors passed, the sun baked the ash-covered footprints into a hard cement-like layer. Subsequent rains and more layers of ash fell, sealing the tracks under a protective blanket. For millions of years they lay hidden, a secret diary of a single afternoon, until their rediscovery in 1978 by a team led by the legendary paleoanthropologist Mary Leakey. When she first saw them, she didn't just see indentations in rock. She saw bipedalism walking on two legs in action. The footprints showed a clear heel strike, a well-developed arch, and a push-off from the big toe, a gait remarkably similar to our own. This wasn't the shuffling, ape-like walk some had imagined. This was efficient, modern-looking locomotion. The Lutoli footprints proved that our ancestors were walking upright long before their brains grew significantly larger. It was a revolutionary discovery, turning our understanding of human evolution on its head. Let's fast forward a couple of million years, to about 1.5 million years ago, in Illirit, Kenya. Here, on the shores of ancient Lake Turkana, another set of footprints tells a different, but equally compelling, story. These tracks were left by Homo erectus, a species much closer to us. They were taller, with longer legs and bigger brains, and their footprints show it. The Illirit tracks are virtually indistinguishable from those of a modern human. They show a fully developed arch and a big toe aligned with the others, confirming a powerful, striding gait built for endurance. This wasn't just a casual stroll. Homo erectus was a traveler, a hunter-gatherer who needed to cover vast distances to find food and resources. Their feet were built for it. These footprints are the tangible proof of our ancestors' transition from forest dwellers to masters of the open savanna. They were chasing game, exploring new territories, and pushing the boundaries of their world. The Illirit prints are a testament to our ancestors' incredible adaptability and resilience. They represent the moment our lineage truly hit its stride, literally. Standing there, you can almost feel the presence of these early humans, part of a group, moving with purpose across the landscape. The tracks are so clear, so modern, that you feel an immediate, visceral connection to the individuals who made them. Now let's jump to a much more recent, yet equally enigmatic site, the White Sands National Park in New Mexico. Here, footprints dated to between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago are rewriting the story of human arrival in the Americas. For decades, the prevailing theory was that the first people arrived around 13,000 years ago. But these footprints say otherwise. They were made on the muddy shores of a long-vanished Lake Otero, and they tell a vivid story of life during the last ice age. What's amazing about the white sand's tracks is the sheer detail they preserve. We see the footprints of adults, teenagers, and most poignantly, young children. One trackway shows a person, likely a woman, carrying a child. You can see how her footprints deepen and slip slightly under the added weight. Then, on the return journey, the tracks are lighter, the child no longer with her. Where did the child go? Was it set down to play? Handed to another person? It's a mystery that brings these ancient people to life in an incredibly personal way. We also see tracks of giant ground sloths and mammoths intersecting with the human prints. Were they hunting these megafauna, or simply sharing the same lakeside resources? These footprints aren't just evidence of presence. They are dynamic scenes of daily life, of childcare, of interaction with a world full of giant beasts. They are a snapshot of a lost American Serengeti. Each of these sites, Latoli, Ilarit, White Sands, offers a unique window into our past. They are more than just impressions in stone or mud. They are fossilized behavior. They allow us to study not just the anatomy of our ancestors, but how they moved, how they interacted, and how they lived. Think about it. A skeleton can tell you about an individual's height, age, and health. But a footprint trackway can tell you about their speed, their gait, whether they were carrying something, and if they were walking alone or in a group. It captures a dynamic moment in time, a slice of life. These footprints are evidence of our ancestors' courage, adaptability, and ultimate survival. They walked out of Africa, crossed continents, and adapted to every imaginable environment, from volcanic plains to icy landscapes. They did it all on their own 2 feet. And with every step, they left a legacy of movement, of exploration, and of the unyielding human spirit to push forward. When we look at these ancient prints, we are looking at the very foundations of our own journey. We are connecting with the individuals who took those first crucial steps for all of us. They are a profound and humbling reminder that we are part of a very, very long story, a story written, step by step, across the surface of the earth. So the next time you leave your own footprints, whether in sand, mud, or snow, take a moment. Think of the millions of years of footsteps that came before you. You are part of an unbroken chain of walkers, explorers, and survivors. Those prints you leave behind might vanish in an instant, but they connect you to an ancient story that is etched in stone and time itself. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey back in time. It's truly humbling to think about the stories hidden right beneath our feet. Ever wonder how a simple footprint can survive for thousands, even millions of years? It's not magic, it's a fascinating story of science and a little bit of luck. Welcome to our deep dive into the science of preservation, where we uncover how fleeting moments get locked in time. Imagine walking on a beach. Your footprints are washed away by the next tide, right? But what if the conditions were just right? What if, instead of water, a gentle layer of fine sediment, like dust or volcanic ash, settled over your tracks? This is the first crucial step in our preservation puzzle. It's like nature carefully placing a protective blanket over a fragile memory. But a single layer isn't enough. The real secret lies in what happens next. The reason these ancient prints we find today survived so long is a perfect storm of chemistry and geology. It's all about the layers. Think of it like making a geological lasagna. After that initial blanket of sediment, other materials need to join the party. One of the star players in this process is minerals dissolved in water. Water seeps through the initial sediment layer and reaches the footprint. As this water evaporates, it leaves behind minerals like calcite or silica. These minerals act like a natural cement, slowly hardening the sediment around the footprint, turning it from soft mud into solid rock. It's a process called lithification, and it's nature's way of creating a permanent cast of that long-lost step. So you have a footprint, now encased in a hardened layer. But it's still vulnerable. It needs to be buried, and buried deep. This is where chance plays a huge role. We need more layers and lots of them. Over millennia, rivers might flood, depositing silt. Winds might blow in sand, creating massive dunes. Volcanoes might erupt, adding layers of ash. Each new layer adds weight and pressure, further compacting the sediment and protecting the fossilized print buried deep within the earth. Let's talk about some of the specific materials that make this possible. Salt and gypsum are incredible preservation agents. In certain environments, like ancient lakebeds or coastal flats, water with high concentrations of these minerals would periodically flood the area. As the water evaporated, it left behind crystalline layers of salt or gypsum. These layers are fantastic because they can seal the tracks in an airtight environment, protecting them from erosion and the elements like a natural time capsule. They essentially pickle the print, keeping its delicate features intact. So you have this perfect stack of layers, a geological sandwich with a footprint filling. For thousands, even millions of years, these prints lie hidden, protected from the wind and rain that would have otherwise erased them. The weight of the overlying rock and sediment keeps them safe, but if they're buried so deep, how do we ever find them? This is the final act of our preservation story, the grand reveal. The same geological forces that buried the tracks can also bring them back to the surface. Tectonic plates shift, mountains rise, and erosion, the very force that can destroy, now becomes our ally. Over countless years, wind and water slowly strip away the overlying layers, like an archaeologist carefully brushing away dust. Then, one day, the conditions are just right. The top layers have eroded away and a once deeply buried surface is now exposed. Shifting dunes might cover and uncover these sites repeatedly, a slow game of hide-and-seek played over centuries. And that's when a sharp-eyed scientist or a curious hiker might stumble upon them. A footprint, made in a fleeting moment millions of years ago, is suddenly basking in the sun again, waiting for modern eyes to rediscover its story. Think about the famous Latoli footprints in Tanzania. They were made by early hominins walking through wet volcanic ash about 3.6 million years ago. Another volcano erupted shortly after, blanketing the tracks and sealing them. For millions of years, they were buried until erosion exposed them in the 1970s. It's a perfect example of this incredible chain of events. So the next time you see a fossilized footprint in a museum, remember the incredible journey it took. It's not just a mark in stone. It's a story of a specific moment in a specific place, followed by an improbable sequence of geological and chemical events. It's a tale of burial, transformation, and eventual rediscovery. A collaboration between earth, water, chemistry, and time, all working together to save a single step from being lost forever. It's a powerful reminder that the ground beneath our feet is a library of ancient stories, just waiting for us to learn how to read them. Thanks so much for joining us on this scientific journey. If you found this as fascinating as we do, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the wonders of our world. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, stay curious. Hello and welcome back to our journey into the deep past. Today, we're stepping into the shoes, or rather the footprints of paleontologists to unravel the stories dinosaurs left behind. We often think of fossils as bones, giant skeletons frozen in time. But what if I told you that some of the most fascinating stories aren't written in bone, but in mud? This is the science of ichnology, the study of trace fossils and specifically dinosaur trackways. These aren't just indentations in rock. They are snapshots of life, moments of action, fear, and maybe even tenderness, preserved for millions of years. So what can a simple footprint tell us? You might think it just shows the shape of a foot and you'd be right. But that's only the beginning. The real magic happens when you find a series of footprints, a trackway. This is like finding a paragraph instead of a single letter. Paleontologists meticulously measure every detail. The length of the stride, which is the distance between two consecutive prints from the same foot. The pace, the distance between a left and right footprint. And the width of the trackway itself. These measurements are clues, data points that help us reconstruct the animal's movement. Think of it like a detective story. A long stride might suggest the dinosaur was moving quickly, perhaps running. A shorter, more measured stride could indicate a leisurely walk. The depth of the print is another crucial clue. A deep print in what was once soft mud tells us about the dinosaur's weight. If the back of the heel is pressed deeper than the toes, it might suggest the animal was slowing down or preparing to stop. Conversely, deep toe impressions could mean it was accelerating, pushing off with force. By combining these observations, scientists can calculate a surprisingly accurate estimate of a dinosaur's walking or running speed. They use specific formulas that relate stride length and estimated leg length to velocity. So we can actually tell if that Allosaurus was out for a stroll or chasing its next meal. But it gets even more interesting. The spacing between the prints doesn't just reveal speed. It tells us about the dinosaur's posture and gait. Were its legs directly underneath its body, like a modern bird or mammal, or did they sprawl out to the sides like a lizard? The narrowness of most dinosaur trackways was one of the key pieces of evidence that revolutionized our understanding of these creatures. They moved efficiently with a gait more like an elephant or an ostrich than a crocodile. These footprints were proof that dinosaurs were built for locomotion. And the stories they tell can be incredibly specific. At the Paluxy River in Texas, a famous track site reveals a dramatic scene. There's a set of large three-toed tracks belonging to a carnivorous theropod, likely an Acrocanthosaurus. Running parallel to it is a set of much larger, rounder tracks from a giant sauropod. For a long time, this was interpreted as a classic predator-prey chase scene frozen in stone. The theropod appears to be stalking the sauropod along the edge of an ancient sea. At one point, one of the sauropod's footprints is missing from the sequence, leading some to speculate that the predator attacked, causing the giant herbivore to stumble. While new interpretations are always being considered, the tracks undeniably preserve a moment of interaction between two titanic animals. It's a dynamic event, not a static skeleton. The social lives of dinosaurs are also illuminated by these ancient pathways. Finding multiple trackways of the same type of dinosaur, all moving in the same direction, is strong evidence for herding behavior. This suggests they moved in flocks or herds, much like modern animals do for safety. It paints a picture of a vibrant, bustling ecosystem filled with complex social dynamics. We can almost hear the stampede as this flock of small ornithopodids scatters in panic. Trackways can even offer glimpses of parental care. One of the most touching examples is a trackway found in the Gobi Desert. It shows the prints of a large adult dinosaur walking alongside a much smaller juvenile one. The stride of the large dinosaur is consistent and even, but the small one's prints are erratic, appearing and disappearing. The story this tells is beautiful in its simplicity. Paleontologists believe the adult was carrying the child for part of the journey. We see the adult's prints, then both adult and child prints appear together as the little one is set down to walk on its own for a bit. Then, the small prints vanish again, suggesting the parent picked it up once more. This isn't just data. It's a moment of tenderness, a parent caring for its young, preserved for over 70 million years. It's a powerful reminder that these weren't just monsters. They were living, breathing animals that raised families. Even the way a dinosaur turned can be deduced. When a dinosaur changes direction, the footprints on the inside of the turn become more closely spaced, while those on the outside spread apart just like a marching band rounding a corner. The sediment might be kicked up and distorted on the outer edge of the print as the foot pivots. By studying these subtle signs of rotation, we can reconstruct the exact path the animal took. Was it a sharp, sudden turn, suggesting it was startled or reacting to something? Or was it a wide, gentle arc? Every detail adds another layer to the story. So the next time you see a picture of a dinosaur footprint, don't just see it as a hollow in the rock. See it for what it is, a fossilized moment of behavior. It's a single word in a lost language that paleontologists are learning to read. And by piecing together these words, they are revealing epic stories of hunts, migrations, social gatherings, and even quiet moments of family life. These tracks connect us directly to the world of the dinosaurs, allowing us to walk where they walked and, for a moment, see the world through their eyes. The ground beneath our feet is a history book, and its most ancient chapters are waiting to be read. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. If you enjoyed stepping back in time with us, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the prehistoric world. See you next time! Video begins, perhaps with a slow pan over a digital reconstruction of an ancient landscape, eventually focusing on a set of footprints in mud. Have you ever stopped to think about what you leave behind? Not your legacy or your accomplishments, but the simple, physical traces of your existence? A fingerprint on a glass, a scuff mark on the floor, or a footprint in the sand. Most of these fade away, erased by time and tide. But what if they didn't? What if a simple set of footprints could survive for tens of thousands, even millions of years? What story would they tell? Welcome back to our journey into the deep past. Today, in what we're calling Chapter 17, we're not just looking at fossils or tools. We're looking at something far more personal, far more intimate, The footprints left by our ancient ancestors. These aren't just impressions in hardened ash or mud. They are frozen moments in time, a direct, unfiltered window into the lives of those who walked the earth long before us. For decades, paleoanthropologists have treated these tracks primarily as data points. And they are incredibly valuable in that sense. Footprints can tell us about bipedalism, how our ancestors walked upright. They can reveal body size, weight, and even the speed at which someone was moving. We can analyze the structure of the foot, the presence of an arch, the way the toes pushed off the ground. All of this is crucial for piecing together the puzzle of human evolution. It's the hard science that underpins our understanding of our own physical journey. But if we stop there, if we only see the data, we miss the most profound part of the story. We miss the humanity. Let's journey back 3.6 million years to Letoli, in modern-day Tanzania. Here, preserved in volcanic ash, are the footprints of 3 individuals, likely Australopithecus afarensis. For years, the focus was on what these tracks told us about their gait. And yes, it confirmed they walked upright much like we do. But take a closer look. Imagine the scene. A volcano, sediment, has just erupted, blanketing the landscape in a fine layer of ash. It starts to rain, turning the ash into a thin, damp mud. And through this muddy blanket walk 3 figures. 2 are walking side by side, their tracks closely aligned. A third, smaller individual walks behind, carefully stepping in the prints left by one of the larger ones. Let that sink in. This isn't just data on bipedal locomotion. This is a family, a group. Perhaps a parent and child with another adult. Was the smaller one a child, holding a hand, struggling to keep up, and finding it easier to walk in the ready-made steps of their parent? Was the ground still warm? Were they scared, hurrying away from the smoking volcano? Or was it just another day, a simple walk to a water source? We can't know for sure. But in those footprints, we can feel the connection. We can see the universal, timeless act of a family moving together. The larger prints show a confident, steady stride. The smaller ones, nested within them, speak of dependence, of trust, of a bond that transcends millions of years. These weren't just specimens, they were people. They had relationships. They experienced the world, and they cared for one another. Now, let's fast forward a few million years. Let's travel to the coast of Norfolk, in England, to about 900,000 years ago. Here, tides recently uncovered another set of astonishing footprints, left by a group of as many as 5 individuals. These are the oldest hominin footprints found outside of Africa. Again, the scientific data is incredible. It tells us about the early peopling of Northern Europe, about the kind of environment these early humans, perhaps Homo antecessor, were living in. But again, let's look closer at the story etched in the ancient mud. The prints belong to a mixed group of adults and children. You can almost see them. A family group, foraging along the estuary of an ancient river, a lost river we now call the Thames. The smallest prints suggest a child who would have stood only about 3 feet tall. Were they looking for shellfish? Gathering edible plants? Were the children playing at the water's edge, splashing and laughing, while the adults kept a watchful eye for predators? These prints don't just tell us that they were there. They show us how they were there. They were living, breathing, social beings. They weren't mythical figures from a dusty textbook. They were us in a much, much earlier form. They felt the cold wind coming off the water. They felt the squish of mud between their toes. They felt hunger, and they worked together to find food. They felt curiosity about the world around them, and they felt fear of the dangers it held. And in the mix of adult and child-sized prints, we see evidence of care, of community, of the fundamental social fabric that has defined humanity from its very beginning. This is the magic of these ancient tracks. They strip away the millions of years of separation. When you look at a fossilized skull, you see an object of study. It's fascinating, but it's still an object. When you look at a footprint, you are looking at an action, an event, a moment of life. You can place your own foot next to it and feel an almost electric connection to the person who made it. You can imagine their breath misting in the cool air, hear their voices calling to one another, feel the same sun on your skin that they felt. These footprints remind us that the grand narrative of human evolution is not just a story of changing bone structures and developing tool technologies. It is a story of lived experiences. It's a story of love, of family, of community. It's a story of fear in the face of a rumbling volcano, and of the simple joy of a walk along a riverbank with your children. The people who left these tracks weren't thinking about us. They weren't trying to leave a message for the future. They were just living their lives, one step at a time. And in doing so, they left us the most intimate gift imaginable, a direct connection to our shared humanity. They show us that for millions of years, we have been fundamentally the same. We love, we fear, we explore, we care for our young, and we walk this earth together. These footprints are not data. They are poetry. They are a mirror reflecting our own deepest selves back at us from across an unimaginable gulf of time. They are a window into humanity itself. And they prove, with every single impression, that we were never mythical beings. We were always simply us. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey today. If you found this perspective as moving as I do, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more explorations into our incredible shared past. It really helps us continue to tell these stories. We'll see you in the next chapter. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most heated debates in modern archaeology. When did the first people really arrive in the Americas? For decades, the story seemed settled, a clean linear narrative we all learned in school. But what if that story is wrong? What if the first footsteps on this continent were thousands, even tens of thousands of years earlier than we thought? That's the explosive idea at the heart of our story today. We're talking about a scientific revolution, a paradigm shift that's forcing us to tear up the old textbooks and start fresh. It's a tale filled with incredible discoveries, fierce intellectual battles, and clues hidden in the most unexpected places, from the bottom of submerged caves to ancient footprints preserved in stone. So let's start with the classic story, the one that held sway for nearly a century. It's called the Clovis first model. The theory goes like this. Around 13,500 years ago, a group of big game hunters, known as the Clovis people, crossed a land bridge called Beringia, which connected Siberia to Alaska. They were armed with distinctive, beautifully crafted spear points, and they spread rapidly across North and South America, supposedly hunting megafauna like mammoths and mastodons into extinction. For a long time, Clovis sites were the oldest confirmed archaeological sites in the Americas. Any claim of an earlier human presence was met with intense skepticism, often dismissed as wishful thinking or bad science. The Clovis first model was the bedrock of American archaeology. It was simple, elegant, and had a ton of evidence to back it up. But science is never truly settled. It's a process of questioning, challenging, and pushing boundaries. And that's exactly what started to happen. Whispers of pre-Clovis sites began to emerge. Places like Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania and Monte Verde in southern Chile. At Monte Verde, archaeologist Tom Dillehay uncovered incredible evidence of a settlement dated to at least 14,500 years ago, a full 1,000 years before Clovis. The preservation was stunning: wooden foundations of huts, bits of chewed seaweed, and even a child's footprint. Initially, the academic community pushed back hard. The findings were controversial, to say the least. But Dillehay's evidence was meticulous. Eventually, a group of top-tier archaeologists, many of them staunch Clovis first proponents, visited the site themselves. After examining the evidence firsthand, they had to admit it. The Monte Verde dates were solid. People were in South America long before the Clovis hunters arrived up north. This was the first major crack in the Clovis first wall. If people were already at the very tip of South America 14,500 years ago, how did they get there? The timeline just didn't work for them to have walked down from Alaska after the ice sheets parted. This opened up a floodgate of new possibilities. Maybe they didn't walk at all. Maybe they came by sea. This is where the Kelp Highway hypothesis comes in. The idea is that early mariners, skilled in using boats, navigated down the Pacific coast, from Asia to the Americas. This coastal route would have been rich in resources: kelp forests teeming with fish, shellfish, seabirds, and marine mammals. It was a veritable prehistoric supermarket. This route would have been passable even when inland routes were blocked by massive ice sheets. And now the evidence for this coastal migration is piling up. Archaeologists are finding more and more ancient sites along the Pacific coast. On islands off California, they found 12,000-year-old spear points that look nothing like Clovis points, designed for hunting marine life, not mammoths. In a submerged cave system in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, divers found the nearly complete skeleton of a teenage girl, nicknamed Naya, dated to around 13,000 years ago. Her DNA connects her to modern Native Americans, providing a direct link to these early peoples. But the story gets even wilder. Some recent discoveries are pushing the timeline back not by thousands, but by tens of thousands of years. Take the Cheruti mastodon site in California. Here, researchers found mastodon bones that appear to have been deliberately broken with stone tools. The catch? The site is dated to an astonishing 130,000 years ago. This claim is understandably extremely controversial. If it's true, it means some species of early human, maybe even Neanderthals or Denisovans, were in the Americas long before Homo sapiens were thought to have left Africa. Another bombshell came from White Sands National Park in New Mexico. Scientists found fossilized human footprints, tracks left by adults and children walking through ancient mud. Using seeds embedded in the footprint layers, they dated them to between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago. This was during the last glacial maximum, the peak of the Ice Age, when massive ice sheets would have made an overland journey impossible. These footprints are hauntingly real. They tell a story of families, of daily life. They are direct evidence of people living in North America 10,000 years before Clovis. The implications are staggering. So, where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us in the middle of a scientific revolution. Not everyone is on board yet. Some researchers remain deeply skeptical, and that's a healthy part of the scientific process. They raise valid questions about the dating methods. Could the seeds at White Sands have been contaminated with older carbon? Could the broken bones at the Cheruti site have been shattered by geological forces, not human hands? These are crucial questions that need rigorous testing and debate. Science isn't about accepting things on faith. It's about challenging, verifying, and building a case brick by brick. Every new discovery is put under a microscope. Researchers re-examine old sites with new technologies, searching for missed clues. They analyze ancient DNA, trace linguistic patterns, and model past climates to piece together this incredible puzzle. But despite the controversy, a new consensus is rapidly forming. The Clovis first model is, for most archaeologists, a thing of the past. The evidence is now overwhelming that humans reached the Americas far, far earlier than we once believed. The debate is no longer if people were here before Clovis, but when they first arrived, how they got here, and who they were. Were they seafaring explorers journeying down the Kelp Highway? Were they Ice Age hunters who found a path through the glaciers? Or could there have been multiple migrations, waves of different peoples arriving over millennia? We are living in a golden age of discovery, and the history books are being rewritten right before our eyes. The story of the first Americans is no longer a simple, single narrative, but a complex, deep, and far more fascinating epic that we are only just beginning to understand. What an incredible journey we've been on today. The story is far from over, and I can't wait to see what scientists uncover next. What do you think? Do you believe the 130,000-year-old evidence? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into our ancient past, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more adventures into the mysteries of history. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Welcome back, history lovers and curious minds. We've journeyed deep into the past, following the ghostly footprints of Ice Age America. We've walked alongside giants and felt the weight of a mother, yes, love, carried across a treacherous landscape. Now we arrive at the final and perhaps most crucial chapter of our story, protecting the past. Imagine discovering a priceless, fragile manuscript. You wouldn't just leave it out in the open, exposed to the elements, would you? Of course not. And that's exactly how scientists view the White Sands footprints. These are not just indentations in the dirt. They are pages from a lost history book, a direct connection to people who lived over 23,000 years ago. Their preservation is a sacred trust. Today, the White Sands Trackway is a site of immense scientific importance and is protected with the utmost care. It's not a tourist attraction where you can just walk up and see everything. In fact, what's been revealed to the public and even to scientists is just the tip of the iceberg, or perhaps the tip of the gypsum dune. The vast majority of these ancient trails remain buried, intentionally kept safe beneath the shifting sands. Why? Because the moment these tracks are exposed to the air, to the sun, to the wind and rain, they begin to degrade. The same forces of nature that have preserved them for millennia can also be their undoing once they are uncovered. It's a delicate dance between discovery and preservation. So the experts in charge have made a wise decision: leave the rest for the future. Think about the technology we have today compared to just 50 years ago. It's a world of difference. Now, project that forward another 50 or 100 years. Future generations will have tools and techniques we can't even dream of. They'll be able to learn from these footprints in ways that are completely non-invasive, extracting even more information without ever putting the tracks at risk. Keeping them buried is a gift to the future, a guarantee that this story will continue to be told. So, how do researchers study the tracks that are asterisk accessible without damaging them? This is where science fiction becomes science fact. One of the primary tools in their arsenal is something called ground-penetrating radar, or GPR. It's as cool as it sounds. Imagine having a superpower that lets you see through the ground. That's essentially what GPR does. A device is wheeled across the surface, sending radio waves down into the earth. These waves bounce off different layers and objects underground. When the waves hit a compacted layer of soil, like the kind created when a person or a giant sloth steps on wet ground, they bounce back differently. By analyzing these return signals, scientists can create a map of what's hidden beneath their feet. They can see the path of the footprints, their depth, their spacing, all without ever touching a shovel to the ground. They can literally see the ghostly echoes of a journey that happened thousands of years ago, hidden just inches below the surface. It's a digital excavation, a way to read the story without opening the book. But they don't stop there. For the tracks that are carefully and temporarily exposed for study, another incredible technology comes into play: 3D mapping and photogrammetry. Using specialized cameras and laser scanners, researchers create incredibly detailed, high-resolution three-dimensional models of the footprints. These aren't just pictures. They are perfect digital replicas. Scientists can zoom in on the tiniest details, measure the precise curve of a heel or the splay of the toes. They can rotate the model, look at it from any angle, and even analyze the subtle pressure changes in the soil. This allows for an unprecedented level of analysis. They can study the gait of the person who made the track, estimate their speed, and even make educated guesses about what they might have been carrying. And the best part? Once the digital model is created, the physical track can be safely reburied, protected once again from the elements. The data, the digital ghost of the footprint, lives on forever, accessible to researchers all over the world without any further risk to the original site. This combination of GPR and 3D mapping is a game changer. It allows for a look but don't touch approach to archaeology. It respects the fragility of the site while maximizing the scientific knowledge we can gain from it. The goal is not just to learn about the past, but to ensure that the past is still there for our children's children to learn from. The team at White Sands includes not just archaeologists and paleontologists, but geologists, computer scientists, and preservation experts. It's a collaborative effort, bringing together the best minds to solve the complex puzzle of this site. They are the modern-day guardians of this ancient story. Every decision is made with painstaking care. They monitor the moisture levels in the soil, the rate of erosion, and the impact of local vegetation. They are constantly developing new and better ways to protect the tracks that are known, while patiently waiting for the right time and the right technology to explore those that are not. This story of the White Sands footprints is therefore a story on two timelines. The first is the ancient one, the tale of a mother and child, of hunters and mammoths, playing out on the shores of a lost lake. The second is the modern story, a tale of scientific innovation, careful stewardship, and a profound respect for the deep past. It has a powerful reminder that our connection to those who came before us is real and tangible. Their footprints are a message across time, telling us that they were here. They lived, they loved, they struggled, and they survived in a world we can barely imagine. Our job, our responsibility, is to listen to that message and make sure it is never silenced. As we stand here at the end of our journey, looking out over the endless white dunes, it's humbling. We are just a brief moment in a story that is tens of thousands of years long. The discovery at White Sands has fundamentally changed our understanding of when people first arrived in the Americas. It has given us a deeply personal, intimate glimpse into their lives. And it has set a new standard for how we can and should protect these irreplaceable treasures from our shared human heritage. The story isn't over. It's just waiting patiently beneath the sand for the next chapter to be written. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible exploration of the White Sands footprints. It's been an honor to share this story with you. If you found this journey as fascinating as I did, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. It really helps us continue to bring these amazing stories from the past to light. Let us know in the comments what part of this discovery blew your mind the most. Until next time, stay curious. Imagine this. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples. You're standing in a vast, otherworldly landscape, a sea of white that stretches as far as the eye can see. This isn't snow. It's gypsum, and as night falls over these dunes, a cool wind begins to whisper secrets across the shimmering fields. It's a sound that has echoed here for millennia, a timeless lullaby for a land that holds its history close. Beneath these pale, moonlit ridges lies something truly extraordinary. Something so simple yet so profound it can stop your heart. Footprints. Not just any footprints, but impressions left by children and hunters, frozen in time for thousands of years. Think about that for a moment. Long before the first cities were built, long before any map was ever drawn, people walked right here, where we stand today. We often think of history as something we read in heavy books, stories of kings and empires, battles and declarations. We see it in crumbling ruins and ancient artifacts displayed behind glass in museums. But history is also this. It's the intimate, personal mark left by an individual, pressed gently into the earth. It's the story of a family, a community, a moment in a life that was just as real and vibrant as our own. Look closer. Can you see them? The smaller prints, perhaps of a child, running and playing, their laughter carried away by the same wind we feel now. Their feet, small and bare, danced across this very ground. Were they chasing a sibling? Or maybe a small desert animal? What was their world like? What did they dream of as they looked up at the same stars we see tonight? These aren't just indentations in the dirt. They are echoes of joy, of innocence, of life itself. And next to them, perhaps, are the deeper, more deliberate tracks of a hunter. You can almost feel the tension in their stride, the focus in their eyes as they moved silently across the landscape. They were providers, protectors, their every step a testament to their skill and resilience. They were connected to this land in a way we can barely comprehend, reading its signs, understanding its rhythms. Their journey wasn't for sport. It was for survival. Their success meant their family would eat, that their community would thrive. These tracks tell a story that words can't quite capture. They are proof that our ancestors weren't just primitive figures in a textbook. They were people. They loved, they grieved, they played, and they worked all under this same sky. They walked this earth with purpose, leaving behind a fleeting signature of their existence. It's a humbling realization, isn't it? To know that our own lives are just another chapter in this immense, ongoing story of humanity. For thousands of years, these footprints lay hidden, protected by layers of sediment, waiting patiently. They were preserved by a perfect, almost miraculous combination of elements. The gypsum-rich mud captured the impressions with incredible detail, and the dry climate then hardened them, turning a fleeting moment into a near-permanent record. It's as if the earth itself decided that this particular story, this specific moment, was too important to be forgotten. Finding them is like opening a time capsule. When archaeologists and paleontologists carefully brush away the dust of ages, they're not just uncovering fossils. They are revealing a direct physical link to our past. Each footprint is a single frame in a long-lost film of human history. By studying the spacing, the depth, and the direction of the tracks, scientists can piece together narratives. They can tell if the person was walking or running, whether they were carrying a heavy load, or even if they were moving together as a group. It's detective work on a geological scale. A series of prints might show a mother walking with her child, their steps side by side. Another might reveal the dramatic scene of a hunter stalking a giant ground sloth, the fate of both man and beast hanging in the balance, written in the sand. These silent dramas, played out tens of thousands of years ago, come to life once more. They remind us that the fundamental human experience is family, community, the struggle for survival, the joy of play are truly timeless. This discovery changes our perception of history. It's no longer a distant, abstract concept. It becomes tangible. You can almost feel the soft earth give way beneath your own feet as you imagine their journey. You can almost hear the children's calls echoing across the dunes. It connects us to these ancient people on a deeply personal level. They are no longer just early humans. They are our relatives, our ancestors. Their steps are the first in a long chain of footsteps that ultimately led to us. So, as the stars begin to blanket the sky over these white sands, take a moment to reflect. History isn't just written in books or carved in stone. Sometimes it's whispered by the wind. Sometimes it's pressed gently into the earth, a fragile yet enduring testament to the lives that came before. And it waits patiently for us to find it, to listen to its story, and to remember that we are all just travelers, leaving our own footprints in the sands of time. What story will our footprints tell, thousands of years from now?